Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. Even before the last moving box hit the splintered floorboards, the walls of Ashmere House had started whispering. That wasn't just some poetic musing from an overactive imagination. It was real. Low, humming murmurs trickled from the vents, even when the heat was off, and shadows seemed to inch just a breath too far across the floors, even in perfect stillness. But by the time Mary realized the house had been waiting for them, watching them, her family was already falling apart, one strange, terrifying piece at a time. The truth is, Mary never wanted the house. It came to them in the strangest way, as if offered deliberately. A letter had arrived 3 months ago. No postage, no return address. Just a thick, bone-colored envelope with her husband's full name printed in precise cursive. Inside, a single sheet of aged paper bore a message that felt more like a command than an invitation. Come home, Jonathan. It's time. Jonathan had stared at it for hours, lips pressed into a tight line, a look Mary had seen only once before. The night of his mother's funeral. He didn't say a word, not at first. But something shifted behind his eyes that night. Something heavy. And then he told her about Ashmere. Ashmere was a place he never spoke of. An old estate deep in the Vermont woods, left to him after the sudden deaths of relatives he barely remembered. He hadn't been there since he was 11, and whatever happened during that visit had sealed his mouth for the next 20 years. It was a summer home, he muttered, not meeting her gaze. We stayed there once, just once. So why go back now? Why uproot their entire life for a creaking relic he barely recalled? It's ours now, he said. We should at least see it. They drove through rain for 6 hours. Their daughter, Lily, curled in the back seat with her headphones in, oblivious to the unease blooming in her parents' silence. The GPS had gone dead 2 miles from the supposed location, and the road leading to Ashmere was little more than a forgotten trail cloaked in wild overgrowth. By the time the house came into view, Mary already hated it. It sat like a bruise beneath the storm clouds, massive and gray and oddly untouched by time. The wraparound porch slanted but stood proud, its railings tangled with dead ivy. 4 tall chimneys clawed the sky like broken fingers, and the windows, dozens of them, stared blankly outward, reflecting nothing, as if the house refused to acknowledge the world around it. Jonathan seemed mesmerized. He stepped out before the car had fully stopped, standing under the iron arch that marked the gate. Mary noticed the way his shoulders lifted slightly, as if a weight had been shifted, not added. Like he'd come back to something that had been waiting. Is it safe? Mary asked quietly, almost too quietly to hear herself. He didn't answer. That first night was quiet, almost too quiet. No cars, no wildlife, not even wind. It was the kind of silence that rang in your ears, like the world had hit pause just for them. Lily explored the upstairs, her laughter echoing too loudly through the bare hallways. Mary cooked something just to make the kitchen feel human again. But the old stove hissed in a way she didn't like. As the sun dipped behind the trees, the house changed. Doors seemed to close slower than they should. The grandfather clock in the foyer ticked unevenly, as if it were counting down to something. Lily came downstairs just before midnight, pale and wide-eyed, claiming she'd heard someone walking in the attic. Jonathan brushed it off. Old houses settle. But that night Mary heard it too. Not settling, footsteps, slow, deliberate ones, creaking above her, pacing, then stopping, right above their bedroom. She lay awake all night, gripping the sheets, waiting for the sound to return. But it never did. Only silence. Not peaceful, but charged like the moment before a scream. The next day, Mary tried the attic door. Locked, no key in sight. Probably warped shut, Jonathan offered. A little too quickly. We'll get it open eventually. But it wasn't the only door that resisted. The basement was sealed, too. The old dumbwaiter in the pantry refused to move. And in Lily's room, the closet door scraped open on its own, slowly, during the night. On the third day, Lily stopped speaking altogether. Mary found her sitting in the hallway at 3 a.m., rocking slightly, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. When Mary crouched beside her and asked what was wrong, Lily only whispered, "He's looking for the red door." That morning, they packed to leave. Mary didn't care if Jonathan thought it was all in her head. She'd seen her daughter retreating into herself, watched the light leave her eyes. She didn't need proof. She just needed to go. But the car wouldn't start. The battery was fine. The engine was clean. There was no reason for it not to start. Jonathan tried 3 times, each attempt slower than the last, as if he knew, deep down, that the house wasn't going to let them go. Then they noticed the forest. Trees had shifted, not just grown, but moved. What had been a narrow driveway leading out now looked like nothing but dense, impenetrable woods. Jonathan walked 50 feet in and came back pale as a ghost, muttering that the trail just kept turning back on itself, like a maze. "We'll wait until morning," he said. "We'll find help." Mary didn't argue. That night, the house breathed. Walls expanded with a sound like ribs creaking. Pipes groaned in a rhythm that felt too human. Windows fogged with shapes that looked like hands pressed from the outside in. Mary didn't sleep. She couldn't. And then, sometime past 2 a.m., the attic door opened. It didn't creak. It clicked. Smooth, decisive. Like someone had been watching the family, waiting for just the right moment. Mary got out of bed and crept into the hallway. The door at the end of the corridor now stood ajar. She looked back once. Jonathan still asleep. Lily curled like a comma beside her teddy bear. And then, heart pounding, she stepped forward. The attic stairs were steep and narrow, the air colder with each step. Dust floated like ash in the single beam of moonlight slanting from a small window at the top. Mary paused, one hand on the frame. Inside, it was empty. No furniture, no boxes, no cobwebbed relics from forgotten ancestors, just space. And at the far end, a mirror. Not an ordinary mirror. It was tall, carved with symbols she didn't understand, and its surface wasn't reflective. Not exactly. It shimmered, moved. She stared, drawn forward, unable to blink, and then she saw it, a face, not her own, watching her from inside the glass. No features, just 2 sunken holes where eyes should be, and a mouth far too wide, twitching as if it was trying to form words it had long forgotten. The air grew thick. Mary couldn't breathe. Then the face smiled. She stumbled back, slammed the attic door, and ran downstairs, shaking Jonathan awake. "It's the house," she sobbed. "It's alive. It's feeding." Jonathan, bleary-eyed and groggy, shook his head. "You're overtired. You're seeing things." But Lily spoke again. From the hallway, still rocking. "The red door," she said again. "He found it. The next morning the front door was gone. Not locked. Not jammed. Gone." Where there had been a large oak entrance stood a solid wall, the wood and wallpaper perfectly seamless, as if it had never existed. Windows refused to break. Phones stayed dead, and every mirror in the house now reflected something different than what stood in front of it. That evening, Mary tried to burn it down. She doused the fireplace in lighter fluid, struck the match, and waited. But the flame fizzled. The wood hissed. The fire refused to catch. The house wouldn't burn. That night, the house began speaking. Through the vents, through the static of the broken radio, in the cracks along the walls, voices, dozens, hundreds, whispering names, dates, begging, laughing, screaming. And at the center of it all, that face, always watching. From the mirror, from the corners, from behind their closed eyelids. Then came the biggest twist of all. Jonathan remembered. Not everything, not at first, but flashes. An attic. A red door that opened without a handle. A promise made in blood. And a brother, a twin, left behind, buried. Alive. His name was Nathan, Jonathan whispered, eyes distant. I was the lucky one. That's what they told me. But I was the one who forgot. Mary stared at him, too numb to feel anything. "You were 11, she said. "They wouldn't." "They did," he said. "The house made them." And suddenly it all made sense. The mirror, the attic, the locked basement, the whispers, the red door. Nathan never died. He changed. And now he wanted out. The house had been keeping him, feeding off him, off others, off them. But now the door was open. The deal was breaking. The past was leaking out like rot through the walls. The house was no longer just haunted. It was hungry, and it had finally remembered the taste of the boy who got away. They were no longer guests. They were offerings. The next morning arrived far too slowly, dragging itself over the sky like a pale, dying thing. Sunlight did nothing to comfort the house. It only seemed to peel back more of its secrets. Mary stood at the foot of the attic stairs, staring up at the closed door that had opened by itself just hours earlier. Her fingers still trembled from what she'd seen. The face behind the glass, the smile without warmth. The presence that felt less like a spirit and more like something ancient pretending to be human. Jonathan hadn't spoken since his midnight confession. He sat in the study with a thick wool blanket around his shoulders, his eyes locked to the empty fireplace, like he expected it to answer for everything. He didn't flinch when Mary walked in, didn't even glance in her direction. He was somewhere else. Somewhere years behind her. "Nathan," she whispered, crouching beside him. "You said he was your twin, that your family left him behind." Jonathan's jaw worked for a moment, but the words were slow to come. "I thought it was a dream," he said finally. "A nightmare I convinced myself never happened. But now it's all coming back." He looked at her, his eyes swollen and bloodshot. "They made me choose Mary." She frowned. "Who? My parents, my uncle, the family, everyone who used this house before. They said it needed balance, that it took and it gave, and it was our turn to pay." Mary recoiled, disgust climbing her spine. "That's not a choice. That's murder." "It wasn't death," Jonathan muttered. "That's the worst part. He didn't die. He was given to whatever lives beyond that red door." Mary couldn't speak. The house around them groaned, as if it had been listening the entire time. The wallpaper near the ceiling curled like dead skin in dry heat, revealing a network of dark symbols etched into the wood beneath. Symbols that hadn't been there yesterday. Or perhaps had always been there, hiding beneath the surface, just waiting to be seen. They had to get out. Mary grabbed Lily's things and packed a small backpack. Just essentials. They didn't need clothes or food. They needed freedom. Air, sky, somewhere not Ashmere. She took Lily's hand, cold and limp, and guided her down the stairs. "We're going," she said. "Now." Jonathan stood. "There's no way out." "There has to be." "There isn't." She looked around the foyer. The front door. Gone. Every window reinforced with some invisible barrier, refusing to break. The forest path outside still and endless, looping mess of trees that pushed inward like they were trying to swallow the house whole. "We can go up," she said suddenly, the idea forming like frost on glass. There was a balcony in the attic. A window. If we can break it, we can jump. We're only one story up on that side. Jonathan didn't argue. Mary led the way. The attic door felt heavier this time. Like the house knew what they were trying to do. It stuck halfway before groaning open. The air was colder now, so much colder. Frost had started forming along the beams, spider webbing from the mirror that still stood at the far end, pulsing softly like a beating heart. The mirror had changed. The face was no longer watching. Instead, it showed the hallway. The one they'd just walked through. But in the reflection, someone was following them, something tall and pale, and dragging its feet like it hadn't used them in years. Mary turned, heart slamming against her ribs. No one was there. The balcony door wasn't locked. Mary shoved it open and stepped into the cold wind. Below, the garden had turned gray. Not dead, just drained. All color pulled from it like it had been painted over and ashed. Jonathan climbed out next, followed by Lily, who moved like a sleepwalker. They reached the ledge, and Mary was the first to swing her legs over. "I'll go down and help you lower her," she said. "We'll figure it out." The drop wasn't far, maybe 12 feet. She landed in a crouch, knees screaming from the impact. She stood, looked up, and froze. Lily was gone. Jonathan leaned over the edge, shouting her name. No reply. Just that terrible wind. Then something shifted in the shadows of the attic behind him. A figure stepped into view. Not Nathan, not quite, but something wearing Nathan's shape. A boy, 11, face cracked and stretched, eyes black and wet, lips sewn shut with thin red thread. He raised one hand. Jonathan gasped, and the boy pointed directly at him. The next moment exploded. Jonathan stumbled back, tripping, slamming into the attic wall. The door slammed shut. Mary screamed his name from the ground below, but it was already too late. The balcony door locked itself again, frost sealing it like glass beneath ice. Inside the house, the whispering returned. And then laughter. It echoed down the chimney, through the walls, from every mirror in every room. Children's laughter. Mocking, joyless, echoing. And underneath it, the voice of a girl. "Lily, she's with me now," the voice said. "You gave me your brother, Johnny. Now I'll give you mine." Mary pounded the walls of the house, screaming until her throat tore raw. But the house had swallowed them. All of them. And it wasn't done yet. That night, Mary slept in the garden. Or tried to. Her fingers numb from the cold, eyes bloodshot and wild, heart pounding with rage and terror. She tried to climb the trellis, tried the basement doors, tried everything she could think of. But the house had no interest in letting her back in. It had taken her family and left her out here to rot. But even in her grief, Mary noticed something. The symbols on the outer walls were shifting, changing every hour, rearranging. Like the house was rewriting itself, like it was planning something. And somewhere, buried deep beneath the frozen soil, the red door was waiting to open again. Mary had one choice. She had to go back inside, but not through the front, not through the attic, not through anything the house wanted her to find. Because if she was going to face whatever had her husband and child, whatever wore Nathan's dead skin and called it life, she had to outsmart the house. She had to find the door it didn't want her to see, the door beneath the house. Because that was the first rule of Ashmere. The house remembers everything, but so does the dirt it's built on, and the dead. The dead never forget. It began with a thump, low and muffled, like something heavy falling just beneath the garden where Mary lay. She startled awake, her joints stiff and freezing, eyes darting across the pale sky above her. For a moment she thought it had been a dream, a memory echoing through her head. But then it came again. Thump, followed by a scraping sound, something shifting, something alive. Mary sat up, heart racing. The frost that covered the lawn was now pulling back slowly, in a perfect ring, revealing bare dirt underneath. The grass seemed to be dying in deliberate patterns, concentric circles, wider and wider, until the entire back portion of the garden resembled a forgotten crop field, marked by some unnatural design. She stood, numb fingers clumsy as they reached for the broken trowel she'd found near the fence line the night before. She didn't know why she grabbed it, just that she needed something to hold, something to fight with, even if it wouldn't help. Then she took a step forward. The air thickened immediately. It pressed against her skin like invisible hands, like the house itself was trying to slow her down. But Mary had reached a new place inside herself. Past fear, past grief. Her daughter was still in that house. So was her husband, if there was anything left of him. If there was still something human behind those blank stares and whispered voices. And Mary would tear open every wall if she had to. She started digging. The soil was softer than it should have been. Damp, but not muddy. Warm, even. And it moved too easily, sliding away like it had been disturbed recently, as if it had already been opened and closed again. She dug until her hands bled, nails cracked, and breath came in sharp, aching gasps. And then she struck something hard: wood. Not a coffin, not stone, a door. She scraped away the rest with her hands and found the outline of what looked like a hatch. Small, round hinges almost swallowed by dirt. No handle. Just a series of strange grooves etched into the surface, like vines or veins wrapping across the top. It pulsed once beneath her hand. Mary flinched. Then the hatch opened on its own. No creak, no jolt. Just a slow, soundless movement as the ground gave way to a narrow spiral staircase leading down into utter blackness. A smell drifted up, damp, coppery, and old. The scent of rot, of rust, of memory. She didn't hesitate. She climbed in. Each step down felt like sinking into the belly of something massive and waiting. The air grew warmer, denser, the smell stronger. As she descended, the walls changed. From earth to stone, then to something else entirely. Black wood. Knotted and pulsing faintly under her fingertips. The staircase went deeper than the house should allow. Far deeper. And then it ended. Mary stepped into a narrow hallway, lit by dim oil lamps nailed to the walls. The flames flickered in unnatural patterns, casting shadows that danced without rhythm. At the far end stood a door. The red door. It was unmistakable, deep crimson, as if painted with blood that never dried. Its surface seemed to breathe, each inhale and exhale timed with Mary's heart. The floor trembled slightly as she stepped closer, and something behind the door groaned. But she didn't stop. She reached for the handle and found none. Of course not. This door wasn't meant to be opened. It was meant to take. Suddenly, a whisper touched her ear, soft and wet. "He's waiting." Mary spun. No one. Just shadows and that ever-present hum of breathless silence. She turned back to the door. Slowly, cautiously, she pressed her hand flat against the center. The door accepted it. It didn't swing open. It peeled. Like flesh splitting, layers of red folding back into themselves, revealing a passage so dark it seemed to swallow the light around it. And from within, a voice. "Mummy?" Mary's knees almost buckled. "Lily," she whispered, breath breaking. "Baby, is that you?" There was no answer. Just the soft sound of feet dragging. She stepped through. The passage twisted immediately. Walls slick, floor uneven. The air was thick, vibrating. Every few feet, Mary saw images pulse beneath the surface of the walls. Faces, moments, memories. Her wedding day, Lily's first breath, Jonathan's proposal. And then, Nathan, 11 years old, pale, trapped in the mirror, reaching out. The house was showing her its collection. And then she saw Jonathan, not a memory. Him, or what was left. He stood at the end of the hall, half in shadow, his face blank and smooth like polished wax. His eyes had no color, just darkness. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His jaw moved too far. Cracking. Mary took a step forward, unsure. Then his voice came, slow and wrong. "I remembered. And now it wants to keep remembering." She stopped cold. "Where's Lily?" she begged. "Where is she, John?" He smiled then, but it wasn't his smile. It wore his smile. "She's learning. It's showing her everything. What came before, what comes next." Mary screamed, lunging toward him. But his body melted into the wall, vanishing like smoke. The hallway behind her closed. She was trapped. The only way out was forward. She pressed on, hands trembling, eyes darting through the shifting corridor. Every inch seemed to move. The red door had led her inside something alive. Something old. Something that fed not on flesh but memory, grief, guilt, history. She emerged into a chamber, wide, circular, walls made of black stone, ceiling lost in shadow. At the center, a pedestal, and on it, a mirror. Not the one from the attic. Worse, this one was cracked, covered in handprints, some small, some impossibly large. The glass rippled. Mary approached and saw Lily, trapped. Her daughter stood on the other side, hair falling in front of her face, eyes wide and empty. She looked thinner, smaller, like something had siphoned pieces of her. Mary reached out, fingers against the glass. "Lily, baby, look at me." The girl looked up and smiled. "I like it here," she said. "It remembers me." Mary's hand slipped down the glass. "No, No, you don't. You're just scared. That's not you talking. I don't have to be scared anymore, Lily said softly. He's here. He keeps me safe. Who? Nathan? Lily nodded. But he's not alone. There's more. So many more. They're all part of the house now. All the ones it kept. Then her face changed, just for a moment. Panic. He's waking up. You shouldn't be here. And then she screamed. The mirror exploded outward, glass flying, shards cutting into Mary's arms as she stumbled back. From the dark corner of the room, something uncoiled. Not Nathan. Not exactly. Something wearing Nathan. The boy stepped forward, his skin stitched in places, his eyes weeping dark tears, mouth stretched by threads of dried blood. His fingers were long now, bones protruding through skin. He looked at Mary, tilted his head, whispered, "You left me." "I didn't," Mary whispered. "I'm not her." He blinked. "No," he said. "But you will be." And then the floor split open beneath her. She fell, down into the heart of the house, down into the memories it refused to bury, down into the beginning. The house had just started its game, and Mary was finally on the board. The fall wasn't endless, but it felt that way. There was no scream left in Mary's throat, no wind in her lungs, only the sickening sensation of being pulled rather than dropped, like the house itself had reached up from its depths and was drawing her down, down into a place it had never intended anyone to see again. Light flickered briefly, blue, then green, then red, in stuttering flashes, like old projector slides stuttering through half-forgotten nightmares. Then darkness closed around her like water, and just when she thought it would never end, she landed, soft, wet. She gasped, sucking in air that tasted like mildew and metal. Her back ached, her arms screamed in protest as she pushed herself up off the floor, a floor made of soaked cloth, layers of damp linen and leather stitched together like old garments. Some still had names sewn into the collars. She stood shakily and turned in a slow circle. This was no room. This was a chamber, round, impossibly vast, with a ceiling she couldn't see and walls that pulsed faintly with the sound of breathing. Around her were remnants of people. Coats, dolls, worn shoes, all lying where they had been dropped or perhaps taken. One corner of the chamber held a child's tricycle, rusted and cracked, its front wheels slowly spinning despite the still air. In another lay a heap of old photograph albums, their pages glued together by some black, sticky film. And then came the voices, soft at first, murmurs, the echoes of things once whispered behind locked doors. But they grew louder with every step Mary took, words pushing through the seams of the walls themselves, bleeding from the past. They weren't speaking to her, not yet. They were rehearsing, repeating old moments, cycling through the pain they'd been soaked in, over and over again. "I didn't mean to lock the door. It said it would only take one. Where's my face? I can't see me. Why can't I see me anymore?" Mary pressed on, boots squishing in the sodden mess beneath her. Her hands brushed a wall, and immediately she recoiled. Something squirmed beneath her palm. Not just moisture, not just rot. Memory, the kind you could feel, and once it touched you, it lingered, clung. A face flashed in her mind, her own, but twisted. Older, broken, her skin stretched too tight, her eyes wide and hopeless. She stumbled back with a sob. It wasn't a vision. It was a warning. This was what the house did. It didn't kill. It preserved. It took your fear, your guilt, your love, and bottled them like fireflies in a jar, sealed them behind walls that breathed and blinked, and fed on them. Then the ground shook, a slow, heavy pulse, once, twice. Something massive moved below the floor, and somewhere far above, the whispering turned to chanting. Mary ran. There were no doors, no exits, only gaps, cracks in the wall that pulsed wider as she approached. She slipped into one, pushing through something that felt like stretched skin, and emerged into a long corridor lit by flickering candles floating in midair. The air here smelled sweeter. But it was wrong. Too sweet, like flowers on graves, like bait. She followed it. The corridor led to a room that should not exist, A nursery, perfect, pristine. Pale blue walls with painted clouds, rocking chair in the corner, a mobile of stars and moons turning gently over a white crib. There were no windows, but the room glowed with soft daylight, as if the house was trying to pretend. Trying to remember what innocence felt like. Mary stepped closer, her breath hitching. Inside the crib was Lily, or something wearing her face. She was turned away, curled beneath a thick knitted blanket, her hair tangled and familiar. Mary's knees buckled as she reached in. "Lily," she whispered. "Baby." "It's Mommy. I'm here." The child turned. Her face was wrong, too smooth, like wax poured into the shape of her daughter. Her eyes were open, but blank glassy. Her mouth smiled, frozen in a loop. Mary screamed and stumbled back, knocking the rocking chair off balance. It clattered to the floor and shattered like porcelain. And the illusion broke. The nursery decayed in an instant. Walls peeled, crib rotted, the ceiling sagged. The blanket turned to ash in Mary's hands. The baby lay there still, but now lifeless, eyeless. Just a doll. And the mobile above spun faster, until it snapped, stars tumbling like broken teeth to the floor. Mary turned and ran. Behind her, the walls of the corridor screamed, not groaned, not creaked, screamed. The voice of the house now fully awake, and it was angry. Not because she'd seen something she wasn't meant to, but because she'd gotten close. It had made a mistake. It had underestimated her. The hallway twisted beneath her, the floor rippling, pushing back with every step. She clawed her way through another tear in the wall and tumbled into yet another space. This one was different, still, silent. And then she heard the piano, a slow, melancholic tune, familiar, her wedding song. She turned a corner, and there he was, Jonathan, alone, seated at a grand piano in a room that looked exactly like the music hall from their reception years ago. His fingers moved slowly across the keys, eyes fixed on the sheet music in front of him. But Mary knew instantly it wasn't him. Not fully. "John," she breathed, stepping closer. "Please, come back to me." He paused, fingers hovering in the air. "I remember," he said, voice thin. "I remember you. The song. The way your dress caught the light." Mary's heart caught in her chest. "But I also remember him," Jonathan added, eyes turning toward her, and they were wrong. Too black. Too deep. Nathan. He never stopped waiting. Mary shook her head, stepping closer. "He's not you. You're stronger than him. Fight him." Jonathan smiled, and something inside his face shifted. Like something was trying to wear his skin from the inside out. He stood, and when he did, the piano began playing on its own. "I tried," he whispered. "I really did." Then he looked at her with pity. "But it's not a house anymore, Mary." He raised one trembling hand. "It's a body." And then the walls of the music room breathed in. Mary grabbed Jonathan's arm and pulled. But his skin was cold, too cold. And beneath it, something pulsed. Something that wasn't blood. He looked at her one last time before the floor gave out beneath them again. This time, she didn't scream. She held his hand. They fell together. And when they landed, it was inside the spine of the house. That's what it looked like. A cathedral of ribs, arching above them, walls made of jointed bones and sinew, pulsing with every breath the house took. At the far end, the red door stood again. Only this time, it was open. And standing just beyond it, silhouetted by firelight, was Lily. This time it was truly her. She held something in her hand. A piece of broken mirror, and as she stepped forward, voice trembling, she said, "I found the way out." Mary ran to her. The house screamed. And the red door slammed shut behind them. The red door slammed shut with a force that shook the bones of the house. The floor trembled beneath them like the pulse of something wounded and furious. Mary held Lily tightly, her arms trembling, unsure if her daughter was real, if she'd finally found the true Lily, or yet another illusion conjured by a house that bent memory and flesh like clay. But the warmth in the child's arms, the erratic thump of her tiny heartbeat, it was real. This wasn't the wax, faced doll from the nursery. This was her daughter, but something was wrong. Lily wasn't crying. She wasn't panicked or even relieved. She stared at the walls with wide, understanding eyes, her fingers still wrapped tightly around the jagged mirror shard she had carried from the depths. Her lips were pale, and she spoke in a voice far too steady for a child who had been lost in the gut of a living house. "It's not the only door," she said. "It's just the one it shows you." Mary knelt in front of her, brushing the damp hair from her daughter's face. "Lily, sweetheart, what happened to you?" Lily didn't answer right away. She stared at the floor, then slowly lifted her gaze to her mother's and whispered, "The house showed me everything." Mary's breath caught. "I saw where it began," Lily continued. "What it was before the walls, before the mirrors, before it wore human skin. I saw all the people it kept, what it fed on, what it wants." Mary gripped her daughter's arms. "And what does it want?" Lily hesitated to be remembered. The words struck Mary like a hammer to the chest. Not blood, not sacrifice, not bodies. Memories. The house fed on stories, on the lives it absorbed. The more pain, the stronger it grew. Every person that stepped through its doors added a new room, a new echo, a new limb. Jonathan had said it. It wasn't a house anymore. It was a body. And it was bleeding. Mary noticed it then. The walls around them, fleshy, raw, slick with something dark and glistening, were slowly leaking. Not water. Not even blood, but ink. Black and swirling, like it had been torn from old letters, forgotten diaries, and burned photographs. The memories it had taken were leaking out. "Why now?" she asked. "Why is it breaking?" Lily raised the mirror shard. "Because I remembered something it wanted to forget." The room groaned, a long, low sound like a dying animal. "You showed it the wrong memory," Mary whispered. Lily nodded. "I showed it the truth. About Nathan. About what they did to him. About how this whole place began." Mary's mind reeled. "The family. Your father's ancestors." Lily's voice turned hollow. "They didn't build the house. They bound it, trapped it here, fed it lies, stories that hid the real one. But I saw the first room, the first door." Mary leaned closer. "Where?" "Below the heart," Lily said, "where the stories sleep." The room shuddered. A violent ripple ran through the floor, splitting the ground just inches from their feet. Beneath the crack, Mary saw it, dozens of faces pressed under the surface like bodies beneath ice, old and young, silent, watching. All of them remembered by the house, held like insects in amber. Mary backed away, pulling Lily close. "We have to destroy it," she said. "The heart, the first story, whatever's keeping it alive." Lily stared into the crack. "We can't destroy it." "Why not?" "Because it is Jonathan." The words hit harder than any blow. Mary stumbled, dizzy, as her daughter's voice echoed in her ears. "What do you mean? He's not possessed. He's not trapped. He is it now. It made him part of the house. That's what it does. It turns you, room by room, thought by thought." Mary's stomach twisted. She thought of the way Jonathan had looked at her. The faint recognition, the sorrow. And she realized it hadn't been a man held prisoner. It had been a man slowly erasing, overwritten by the house's will. But that meant, if we destroy the house, she said quietly, we destroy him. Lily looked away. There it was, the impossible choice. Escape and leave Jonathan behind, if there was even anything left of him. Or find the heart, end the nightmare, and kill the last part of the man she loved. The walls pulsed harder now, angry. The ink on the floor began to swirl, pulling into shapes, figures rising from the liquid memory, faces without eyes, mouths sewn shut. They clawed at the edges of the room, trying to remind her, to pull her into their story, to make her one of them. Mary grabbed Lily and ran. Down another passage, this one steeper, slicker. They slipped, fell, scrambled to their feet again. The path narrowed, ceiling dropping low. The lights grew dimmer. The house was collapsing inward now, turning against itself. A sickness had infected its bloodstream, the truth. Lily's memory was poisoned. Then the chamber. a circular room at the end of the passage. Completely dark, except for a single red thread pulsing on the floor, winding through the center like a vein. Mary followed it with her eyes, until she saw it, the heart, not metaphorical. A literal wet, monstrous heart, suspended by roots and cords of muscle. Dripping ink onto the floor below, it beat slowly, with effort, struggling. And wrapped tightly around it was Jonathan, his body fused with the root system, face barely visible, chest rising and falling as the heart pulsed with him. He wasn't dead. Not yet. Mary stepped forward. John, his head turned, eyes opened. They were his eyes. He saw her. Mary, he gasped. You found the root. Lily stayed behind her silent. Mary reached toward him. We're going to get you out. Jonathan shook his head slowly. No, you can't. I'm in it now. I am it. If you destroy this, I go with it. Tears poured down Mary's face. Then come with us. Help us find another way. There is no other way. The walls groaned louder. Figures began to form again. Whispers gathering in the shadows. Memories of others who had come close. Who had tried. Who had failed. I remember you, Jonathan said, his voice barely audible. That's the only part that still fights. You. And Lily. That memory, it's the only thing it can't erase. Mary's heart shattered. Then hold on to it, she said. Hold on to us. She lifted the shard of mirror Lily had carried. It reflected nothing now, only darkness. But as she turned it toward the heart, the ink began to recede. The walls screamed. The heart shuddered. It's dying, Lily whispered. Mom, now. Mary looked up at Jonathan. His eyes still held hers. He nodded. Do it. She didn't scream. She didn't hesitate. She drove the mirror shard straight into the pulsing heart. The entire house convulsed. Walls cracked. Ceilings split. Every mirror shattered. Screams erupted, not of the living, but of the remembered. Pain, joy, rage, love, all spilled out like light through broken glass, and the heart burst. The explosion of ink was blinding. Then, silence. Then, light. Mary opened her eyes. She was lying in the front garden. Ashmere House was gone. Not in ruins. Gone. Only a scorched circle remained, surrounded by dead trees. Beside her, Lily stirred, alive, real. They looked at each other, speechless. Then a hand touched Mary's shoulder. She turned. Jonathan stood there. Not fused. Not bleeding. Not quite whole, but smiling. Now, he said softly, we can forget it. Mary pulled him into her arms, sobbing. But as she did, she noticed something over his shoulder. A figure, a boy, Nathan, watching, smiling, and then he faded into the trees. The memory of Ashmere would never die. But for now, it had let them go. For now. They didn't speak of the house for 3 days. Not because they had made a pact, or promised to leave the past behind, but because words felt brittle, too weak to carry the weight of what they'd survived. The three of them, huddled in the tiny motel room just off Route 17, lived in a suspended silence, like waking from a near, fatal accident and being unsure if you'd really survived. Mary watched her husband sleep in shifts, as if afraid the house might still pull him back, that he might dissolve into smoke the way he had before. Jonathan barely ate, barely spoke, and Lily stared at walls, not blankly, but attentively, as if she was still listening. By the 4th morning, Mary broke. She sat at the edge of the bed while Jonathan stared at the TV screen. Nothing but static, his eyes unfocused. She couldn't bear it anymore. I think it's not over, she said softly. He didn't look at her. Didn't blink. I think it moved. That got his attention. He turned, and for a second, just a second, fear flashed in his eyes. Move the house. It didn't burn. It didn't fall. It left. Jonathan sat up, rubbing his face. It's gone. You saw it, nothing left but ash. That's just it. Mary stood and walked toward the window. There wasn't ash. Just a circle. A perfect one. Like it was erased. She paused. That doesn't feel like destruction. That feels like retreat. Jonathan exhaled hard through his nose. Why would it run? We killed it. Mary turned slowly. We wounded it. Maybe even broke it. But something like that, I don't think it dies. I think it hides. I think it waits. Behind her, Lily spoke for the first time in days. It's remembering again. Mary froze. She turned to face her daughter, who hadn't moved from her corner since breakfast. What did you say? Lily's eyes were wide, pupils dilated. I can feel it. Pieces of it. They're still out there, trying to find new places to live. Jonathan looked at his daughter like he didn't recognize her. What do you mean? Lily finally looked up. It doesn't need the whole house to grow back. Just a story. Just a memory. Someone willing to let it in. Mary's throat dried. Jonathan paled. You said it fed on memory. It's not just feeding anymore, Lily whispered. It's sharing. Mary moved toward her. Lily, what do you remember? What is it showing you? Lily didn't blink. Other houses. Other rooms. Different places. They're not connected like Ashmere was. Not yet. But they're starting to be. Jonathan stood now. It's spreading. No, Lily said, it's growing back. And it's pulling others into it. People who've lost something. People who want something back. People who are willing to believe. And suddenly, Mary understood. The house had never just been a place. It was an idea. A wound. A legend that carried itself like a virus, slipping into stories, taking root in grief. A man mourning a child hears of a door in his basement that opens once a year. A woman desperate to speak to her dead sister finds an old mirror in a flea market. A boy alone in foster care is adopted by a family living in a house that's just a little too quiet at night. That's how it spreads. Through belief, through need, through memory. That night, Jonathan packed. They drove 6 hours to a quiet town where his old college friend still lived, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions and had a guest house behind the main home. They slept in shifts. Ate little, said less, but the dreams began anyway. Mary first. She dreamed of a hallway without an end, of doors that opened to nothing, of footsteps that followed her, but never approached, of a red thread sewn into her skin, pulling her back toward something she couldn't see. Then Jonathan. His dreams were worse. He screamed in his sleep, cried out names Mary didn't know, most often Nathan. He clawed at the walls, waking with blood beneath his nails and no memory of how it got there. But it was Lily's dreams that chilled them the most. Because she didn't scream, she smiled. Mary found her one morning at 3:07 a.m., standing in the bathroom with the mirror pressed to her forehead, whispering. When she asked what she was doing, Lily only said, "I'm listening." Jonathan forbade mirrors in the house after that. He covered every reflective surface, boarded up every glass panel, taped over TV screens and turned off phones. But the dreams kept coming, and with them, the messages, letters with no stamps, emails that appeared without being sent. One night, Mary opened a notebook to find a page already filled, written in her own handwriting. You can't kill memory. You can only choose who holds it next. The writing wasn't hers. And then came the first knock, soft, 3 times. At exactly 2:00 a.m., they checked the door. No one. The next night, it came again. Then again, each time more urgent, more deliberate. They moved again, farther this time, changed names, bought only what they needed, kept Lily out of school. But every town had its own forgotten house, its own strange rumor, its own whisper of something that couldn't quite be explained. A man in a bar said his dog refused to enter the spare bedroom. A woman at a thrift store warned Mary not to buy any mirrors that didn't show her reflection. A gas station clerk kept a picture in his wallet, not of family, but of a door. He said it appeared in his dreams and asked if she'd seen it too. The house hadn't died. It had planted seeds. Mary realized it too late. Every person who escaped Ashmere carried it with them, not the house itself, but the knowledge of it, the memory, and memory spreads, like fire, like rot, like truth. She thought about warning people, writing it down, telling the world what they'd seen, but even saying its name seemed to strengthen it. Even remembering it gave it shape. And Lily, quiet little Lily, said it best: if we speak it, we feed it. If we fear it, we free it. So Mary made a new plan. They would forget, as best they could. They would bury their memories so deep that the house couldn't find them again. But what none of them realized is that something was already waking in Lily. Not the house. Something worse. Because the house remembers. But Lily understands. And some things don't want to be forgotten. Some things want to be rebuilt. It began with the drawings. Crude, childish sketches at first. Houses with too many windows, trees shaped like outstretched fingers, and small stick figures standing in front of doorways, shaded entirely black. Mary had found them folded beneath Lily's mattress one morning, drawn on the back of receipts and old flyers, the kind of scraps you don't expect to mean anything. But each drawing had one thing in common: a red door, always at the center, always waiting. She burned the first 3. Then Lily drew 5 more. Mary asked her about them. Lily only shrugged. "They're not mine," she said. And for a second, Mary believed her. The girl's eyes, once soft with childhood, now held a knowledge that didn't belong. Her speech had changed too, less like a child, more like someone remembering what it was like to be one. Sometimes, in the early hours of the morning, Mary would find Lily sitting straight up in bed, her eyes wide and glassy, whispering to herself in a voice that barely moved her lips. "I don't know which room I'm in anymore." And still, Jonathan refused to see it. "She's traumatized," he'd argue, pacing the floor with exhaustion, carving deep lines into his face. "She lived through hell. Mary, you can't expect her to come out untouched." Mary wanted to believe that. God, she needed to. But the longer she watched their daughter, the more she recognized something familiar. A pattern she'd seen before back in the house. Not in the structure itself, but in the way it moved. Not physically, but through people. Thoughts. Memories. It didn't need walls anymore. It had found another way in. And Mary feared Lily wasn't just haunted. She was changing. It started with the apartment. They had moved again, this time to a small 2-bedroom place above a laundromat in a quiet town no one had heard of. The kind of place where you didn't ask questions and kept your head down. It was meant to be temporary. Clean. Safe. But 2 weeks in, Mary began noticing strange things. The layout changed. At first it was subtle. A hallway felt longer. A kitchen cabinet that used to be above the sink had now moved near the fridge. Nothing drastic, nothing you could prove. But it left a nagging unease. She chalked it up to stress until the bathroom door disappeared entirely. She'd gone to get a towel from the bedroom, and when she returned it was gone. Not closed, not locked, gone. As if the wall had never had a door at all. She called Jonathan. He walked in and pointed to the door, right where it always had been. But to Mary, it was a solid wall. For hours, she sat on the floor, staring at the spot, convinced the house was folding in on itself again. She thought she was losing her mind. Until Lily walked past her, paused, and said, "Not all doors are for you, Mommy." Mary looked up, her blood freezing. "What does that mean?" Lily just smiled. That night, Mary slept on the couch with every light on. She dreamed of mirrors again, but not ones she looked into, ones that looked into her. The reflections were wrong, all slightly off. Her hair parted the wrong way. Her mouth didn't smile when her face did, and always, in the corner, a small red shape, growing closer. A door. The next morning, Mary found another drawing on the kitchen table. This one was different. It wasn't drawn in crayon, but in something dark. Brownish. She didn't want to guess what. It showed their apartment floor plan, down to the smallest detail, but with added rooms. Places that didn't exist. Hallways that curved where there were none. A staircase leading downward, deep below the kitchen floor, and in the center a red door with something scrawled above it in tiny letters. Teach Isoen Opensfo Arsar. Mary tore it up, flushed the pieces. She tried to stay calm. She tried to tell Jonathan. He laughed, then caught himself, seeing the panic in her eyes. "Maybe she's processing it," he said. "Working through the trauma." Turning it into drawings it's better than the screaming. But there was no screaming. Not anymore. That was the real problem. There was too much silence. And the silences began to hum. The apartment walls buzzed at certain hours, always around 3 a.m. The hum was low, constant, like static buried under a frequency no one could hear unless they were meant to. Sometimes the lights flickered with the hum. Sometimes the air thickened, and sometimes the rooms changed. Mary began keeping notes, diagrams. Every day, she sketched the layout. Every night, she compared. And almost every time something was different. A closet moved. A window disappeared. A wall had grown longer. And once, the front door didn't lead outside, but into another hallway. It only lasted seconds. But it was enough. She slammed it shut, locked the bolt, and slid to the floor shaking. It wasn't just coming back. It had already arrived. Piece by piece, it was rewriting reality through Lily. And Lily was letting it. Mary confronted her one night, sitting on the edge of the girl's bed, holding one of the drawings she'd secretly photographed before destroying. "What is this, baby?" she asked gently. Lily didn't look up from her pillow. "A map. To what?" Lily shrugged. "The next house." Mary's voice cracked. "There isn't supposed to be a next house." Lily finally turned to her. And for the first time, Mary saw it. Not malice, not possession, but understanding, a terrifying, perfect calm. "There's always another house, Mommy," she said. "You just have to find someone who remembers enough to build it." Mary stood so fast the bed squeaked. She ran to Jonathan, told him everything. He finally listened. And for the first time since Ashmere, they agreed on something: they needed help. Real help. They didn't go to police. No therapist could unsee what they'd lived through. Instead, they found the name scrawled on the back of one of the oldest letters they'd received. Long before the house collapsed. It was written in barely legible script, almost invisible in the corner: Dr. Eloise Harrow, archivist of unmade places. No phone number, just an address. Abandoned lighthouse, coast of Maine. They packed that night. By morning, they were gone. But before they left, Mary checked the apartment one last time and found something she hadn't noticed before. Carved into the underside of the dining table, etched deep in childlike handwriting: OWEFUFRG2 escapade DUE RAMBRTORURN, and beneath it the faint outline of a door, not red, not yet, but soon. The road to the lighthouse was steep and empty, winding like a thread through a coastline that had long been abandoned by the living. Waves crashed somewhere out of sight below, masked by mist so thick it seemed to eat sound. Mary drove in silence, knuckles white on the wheel, while Jonathan stared out the window, as if he were watching for something just beyond the fog. And in the back seat, Lily didn't speak. She hadn't spoken in hours. She just hummed, softly, under her breath, the tune from the old music box Mary had buried years ago. The closer they got to the coast, the heavier the air became. Not just fog, something else. A pressure in their skulls, a buzzing in their bones, as if the land itself remembered what they were bringing with them. The lighthouse finally emerged from the gray, towering above them, crumbling but still standing. It was a pillar of time, battered by storms and neglect, yet unbroken, like a monument left behind by something that didn't need to explain itself. They parked near the cliff's edge, the ocean far below invisible but deafening. The lighthouse had no light in its top chamber, no electricity at all, and yet it felt awake. The door was unlocked. Mary hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside, the air was dry, warm. Dust hung in the stillness like suspended breath. The floorboards creaked under their weight, but not in the usual way. More like a response, like footsteps echoing ahead of them. Unseen but always just a few paces further. Jonathan was the first to see the symbols. Carved into the walls, shallow and looping. Familiar in that awful way nightmares become when they crawl into the daylight. They were the same symbols that once wrapped the attic mirror. The same that lined the floor of Ashmare's basement. The the same that had etched themselves into Lily's drawings. Ancient, patient, and endlessly watching. At the center of the room sat a desk, cluttered with brittle paper, stacks of notebooks, rusted keys, broken lenses, and in the center, an old-fashioned tape recorder. Behind it, framed in shadow, was a woman. Thin, tall, motionless. "Dr. Harrow," Mary said, though it felt strange to call out. The woman didn't move at first. Then slowly, her head lifted, and Mary saw her face gaunt, eyes sunken but alert. Skin, like paper stretched too thin over a wire frame. She looked like someone who had not only seen the house, but had walked through it many times and managed to crawl back out, each time leaving something behind. "You came," she said, her voice cracked and dry. "I wasn't sure you'd survive. We destroyed it," Mary said, her voice hollow. "At least, we thought we did." Dr. Harrow smiled, the kind of smile you give to a child who still believes in monsters under the bed, but hasn't yet learned that some monsters sleep under you. "No one destroys it," she said. "You just change its shape." Jonathan stepped forward. "We need help. We think it's trying to grow again." Doctor Harrow's eyes slid to Lily, who remained in the doorway, silent, face blank. "Of course it is," she said, standing. "That's what it does. It spreads through grief, through memory. It finds those who've lost something and offers them a place to keep it. A room, a hallway, a door they were never supposed to open." Mary's throat tightened. "So how do we stop it?" "You can't," Harrow said, turning away. "But you can trap it. Again. For a little while." She led them up a winding staircase that spiraled tightly through the tower. Along the walls, faded photographs and burnt maps had been nailed, every one depicting houses that no longer existed, places erased from memory. Not just burned, not just abandoned, unmade. "The house that took you," Harrow said as they climbed, "was a collector. A middle child in a long family of forgotten places. But it wasn't born from architecture. It was born from want. Someone, somewhere long ago, wished to forget something so powerful, so painful. It tore a hole in what's real." She paused, and something came through. Mary's breath hitched. "The first red door." Harrow nodded. "The first invitation. Ever since, it's been hunting those who carry memory like firewood, dry, desperate, ready to burn." They reached the top. The chamber wasn't what Mary expected. No lantern, no glass. Just a circular room with a map drawn across the stone floor in chalk and ash. But this wasn't a map of roads or oceans. It was a map of rooms. Harrow knelt beside it, running a fingertip along a looping corridor. "Every survivor becomes a seed. Every memory, a brick. Your daughter, she's more than a survivor." Mary turned. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Harrow said, meeting her eyes, "the house didn't just take something from her. It gave something back. A thread. A key." Lily finally stepped into the light, and in her hand, she held the mirror shard again. The same one Mary had driven into the house's heart. Unbroken, unchanged. "I didn't keep it," Lily said softly. "It followed me." Mary wanted to scream. Dr. Harrow stood slowly, carefully. "That mirror isn't glass anymore. It's portal, a piece of the house itself. It'll never let her go. But it can be used, once, to lead you back in, not into Ashmere, into the root, where it all began." Jonathan stepped back. "You want us to go back into it?" "No," Harrow said. "I want you to finish what no one else ever could." She reached into her coat and pulled out an old photograph, sepia, toned, torn at the edges. It showed a small house, barely more than a cabin, with no windows and a heavy door. Beneath the image, one word was written in trembling ink: "First house." Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "That's where it started." Dr. Harrow nodded. "And it's where it ends. But only if someone opens the door from the inside." Mary felt something click into place, a realization she hadn't wanted to face. "The house wants to grow again," she said. "It's using Lily. But she can get inside. She's the only one who still hears it." Lily stepped forward. "I have to go back," she said. "I'm not afraid anymore." Jonathan shook his head. "No. No way. We can't let her. She's already there, Harrow interrupted. Even now, a piece of her never left. The lighthouse shook then, just slightly, but enough to make dust rain from the ceiling. Outside, the mist thickened. It's found her again, Harrow said. Mary looked at her daughter, saw the calm resolve in her eyes, and hated herself for what she was about to say. We go with her. Jonathan's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. I'm not leaving her, Mary said. Not again. Not ever. Harrow drew a circle of salt on the floor, placed the mirror shard in its center. This will open the path. But once you cross, there's no guarantee you'll return. The first house, it's not like the others. It doesn't just trap you. It rebuilds you. Lily stepped into the circle first, then Mary, then Jonathan, still shaking, still silent. The mirror pulsed once, then again, and then it opened, not with light, but with memory. And all three fell through, not into a place, but into a story older than language, a place without walls, without time, where the first grief had carved the first door, and where something still waited behind it. They landed without falling. No impact, no jolt. Just a sudden shift in presence, like stepping from one thought into another. Mary's feet touched down on cold, damp earth, but the air was wrong, thick and weighted, humming with something alive. Not wind, not life. Memory. Memory pressed against her skin like invisible fingers, whispering stories she didn't recognize, but somehow understood. Jonathan appeared beside her with a gasp, hand outstretched, his knuckles white. Lily stood ahead of them, already staring forward, calm in a place that had no name except what they'd been told. The first house. It wasn't a house in the traditional sense. It didn't even pretend to be. It was a structure forged out of absence, shaped not by bricks and beams, but by something far more primal, loss. It stood low and wide, sunken slightly into the earth like it had grown there rather than been built. No windows, just walls of uneven stone, as dark as dried blood. Moss clung to its sides, but didn't seem to grow. Nothing did. The trees surrounding it leaned away, their roots exposed and writhing along the ground, as if trying to retreat. Even the sky above it refused light, just a dull, gray stretch of nothing, a sky that had forgotten how to be day or night. The front door wasn't red, it was black, charred, burnt as if by something ancient and unforgiving. The surface pulsed once when Mary looked at it directly, like a throat swallowing something alive. Lily turned toward them and said softly, "It wants us to remember." Jonathan swallowed. Remember what? Mary already knew. The beginning. Lily nodded, then placed her small hand on the door. It didn't creak. It didn't swing. It simply disappeared, melting into the frame like it had never existed. And beyond it, darkness. Not empty darkness. Thick, living dark. A black that curled along the edges of their vision and seemed to breathe with its own slow, damp rhythm. As they stepped inside, Mary felt her thoughts stretch and thin, as if the place were slowly pulling her mind apart, strand by strand. The first house had no layout. It was layout. Every room was every room they'd ever known, every hallway they'd ever walked. Mary saw flickers of her childhood bedroom, the hospital room where Lily was born, the hallway from Ashmere, twisting into each other, blurring together in impossible ways. The walls whispered, not just noise, her own voice echoing memories long buried. "Don't go back in there. John, she's not speaking to me anymore. I think I felt something in the mirror." She clutched her head, stumbling. Jonathan caught her, eyes wild. "I heard you. Just now. Like you were standing beside me, saying things you never said out loud." Lily walked ahead. The house didn't move around her. It moved with her, like it recognized her, folded for her, made space for her to exist. Every time Mary blinked, the rooms around them changed. Old rooms, real rooms, twisted into new purposes. A nursery filled with mirrors instead of toys. A kitchen where blood boiled on the stove. A hallway made entirely of doors, each one pulsing like a heartbeat. In the center of the house, they found it, a well. not made of stone, but of memory. The rim was forged from dozens of human faces, some frozen in agony, others in peace, some simply hollow. They were fused together, mouths agape, as if screaming endlessly into the void below. The center was so dark it didn't reflect. It swallowed everything. Mary stepped forward. "What is it?" Lily's voice was barely a breath. "It's where the first one went." Jonathan looked confused. "The first what?" "The first person to forget," she said. "The one who started the story. The one who made the door." They stared into the well, and it stared back. From its depths rose sound, not voices, not music, but raw feeling, grief, loneliness, shame, all climbing toward them like fingers reaching from water. Then the room began to pulse. Lily stepped closer to the well. It remembers all of us. Everyone it's touched, everyone it's taken. But it's tired now. Mary grabbed her arm. "We came to end it, not feed it." Lily turned to her mother, eyes strange and bright. "We can't destroy it, but we can lock it in, like they did before. But this time, we have to give it something it hasn't had in a long time." Mary's lips parted. "What? A keeper?" The word chilled Mary to the bone. Jonathan paled. "You mean, she's the key," Lily said. "But it needs someone to hold the door closed. From the inside." Mary's heart broke before the words even left her mouth. No, not her. "Anyone but her. I can do it," Lily said simply. "It's already part of me. I can walk it shut." Mary collapsed to her knees. "You're my daughter. You were supposed to forget," Lily whispered. "But you remembered too much. That's why it followed us." Mary sobbed, reaching for her, but Jonathan stepped between them, his face unreadable. "No," he said. Mary looked up. "I'll do it." Lily blinked. "Dad." "You're right," Jonathan said, voice shaking. "It's inside me too. From the moment Nathan died. Maybe even before. I've carried it for years. Maybe that's why it found us." "Found you." He smiled, but it was a sad, broken smile. "This isn't your weight to carry." "Lily." "It's mine," Mary screamed. "No." But Jonathan was already stepping to the edge of the well. "I remember everything," he whispered into the dark. And the well opened. It bloomed like a flower of shadow, revealing a staircase descending into forever. The house pulsed again, this time not in hunger, but reluctance, like it knew what was about to happen. Jonathan looked back at his wife, at his daughter. "I love you," he said. Then he stepped in. The staircase sealed behind him, and the house shuddered, walls cracked, rooms collapsed. The first house began to close. Mary grabbed Lily, running for the collapsing doorframe. Behind them, the structure groaned like a wounded beast, screaming with every timber and memory it let go. They barely made it through the black frame before the entire structure inverted, folding in on itself, vanishing into a single point in the mist. Gone. For now. Mary collapsed on the cliffside, gasping, Lily cradled in her arms. Dr. Harrow was waiting. "You sealed it," she said. "That's more than most." Mary looked at her. "He's still in there?" Harrow nodded. "And he always will be." Mary closed her eyes, and finally the silence was clean. But in the sky above them, the mist didn't break, and far, far below the earth, behind a door without color, someone began to whisper again. It began again in silence, not the heavy, haunted quiet they had grown used to, but a brittle, unnatural stillness that crept into the corners of the world like dust. It was the kind of silence that follows something important, something terrible, like a breath held just a second too long before the scream. After the collapse of the first house, after Jonathan's final step into the memory. Well, Mary and Lily returned with Dr. Harrow to a cabin deeper inland, far from the lighthouse, far from anyone. A place that wasn't marked on any modern map, a place even memory couldn't reach easily. At first, things were still, almost peaceful. Mary cooked again. Small, simple meals. She sat by the fire in the evenings, holding a cup of tea she never drank, just feeling its warmth in her hands. Lily would draw sometimes, but never the red doors anymore. Her lines were lighter, softer. Birds. Trees. A sun that actually had rays. And for a while, Mary allowed herself to believe they'd done it, that the door was shut, that Jonathan's sacrifice had sealed the wound once and for all. But the house, the real one, the first house, had never just been a place. It was a hunger, a pattern, and patterns don't die, they sleep. It started with the wind. Late one night, Mary stood outside, staring at the stars, when the wind blew hard enough to push her back a step, but it didn't touch the trees, didn't rustle a single branch. It only moved her, as though it had been aimed. That night, Lily spoke in her sleep for the first time in weeks. "They're calling him back," she mumbled, face pale, hands clenched into fists beneath the blanket. "They need someone to hold the handle now." Mary leaned in. "Who's calling?" Lily's voice dropped to a rasp, the ones he kept out. They never stopped knocking. Mary lay awake until sunrise, staring at the ceiling, wondering what exactly they had locked Jonathan inside, and what had been locked out. She spoke to Harrow the next day. "Tell me the truth," she said, "about what's really in there, what we actually shut away." Dr. Harrow didn't answer immediately. She turned, looking out over the pines, the mist that still never quite left the treetops. "It's not one thing," she said. "Not a monster. Not a ghost. The house is a refusal. It's every story that ever begged to be forgotten, every grief no one could carry, every memory too dangerous to keep. It collects them, gives them form." Mary swallowed. "And what happens when it runs out of space?" Harrow's eyes darkened. "It finds more." She hesitated before adding, "It's always found more." Lily had changed again, not obviously, but in the way she moved. Lighter, more still, as if something was watching through her or waiting for permission to step forward. And she no longer asked about Jonathan, not once. That more than anything made Mary afraid. 3 nights later, Mary woke to find her daughter gone. The bed empty, cold. The door to the cabin stood open, letting in the chill. She found Lily by the tree line, barefoot, her nightgown fluttering in a breeze that didn't reach the trees. In her hand was a new drawing. Mary snatched it before she could hide it. It wasn't the first house. It wasn't Ashmere. It was something else. A house made entirely of doors. Hundreds of them, stacked, layered, built into impossible shapes, rising like a cathedral or a nest. And in the center, drawn not in crayon, but what looked disturbingly like ash, was one door larger than the others. A single phrase was scrawled beneath it. "The door tadi ie high spars bck." Mary grabbed Lily by the shoulders. "What is this?" Lily looked at her, and for a moment she wasn't Lily. Her voice came lower, flatter. "You closed one door." But the others heard. Mary dropped the drawing, took a step back. "Lily." And then her daughter blinked. Just like that, the strange look was gone. "Mom," she said softly, confused. "Why are you crying?" Mary ran her fingers through her hair and turned away, breathing hard. They weren't finished. They had only slammed one gate shut, and in doing so, they had woken the rest. Harrow found the drawing later, flattened and hidden beneath Lily's bed. She stared at it for a long time. Then she spoke 5 words Mary would never forget: "The house is waking others." She rolled out a map, one older than the country itself, written in languages no one spoke anymore, and marked 5 spots. Each one is a forgotten place. Places where memory never quite fits. Abandoned hospitals. Tunnels that shouldn't lead anywhere. Schools where time skips. She pointed at the largest circle. "This one is the whisper door." Mary stared at it. "Where?" Harrow's mouth thinned. "Nowhere. Everywhere. It moves." Mary's heart pounded. "What does it want?" "It wants you," Harrow said. "Not Lily. Not Jonathan. You." Mary shook her head, stepping back. "No, I was never its focus. But you remember everything," Harrow said. "And that's what gives it strength. Memory. The more you remember, the more doors it grows. You're keeping it alive just by surviving." Mary looked at her daughter again. "What happens if I forget?" Harrow's silence was answer enough. Mary went cold. Then it takes her. They had built a prison, a place to bury what should never be spoken. But prisons need wardens, and wardens can't forget. That night, Mary sat alone in the dark. She picked up one of Lily's new drawings, one she hadn't shown anyone yet. It was a picture of a mirror, and in the reflection, Mary's face. But behind her another door. This one wasn't red. It was open. Mary stopped sleeping. Not because she chose to. She couldn't. Every time her eyes drifted closed, her mind betrayed her. She no longer dreamed in fragments or flashes. No peaceful forgetfulness. Her sleep, when it came, was occupied entirely by doors. Doors in walls where none had ever been. Doors in the floor. Doors that opened behind her while she ran and always showed her the same thing, her own reflection, turning slowly to face her, wearing her thoughts like clothing and smiling with someone else's mouth. The worst part wasn't that the dreams came. It was that the doors in them were open. She started hearing them in waking hours too. Low voices, muffled, pressing through the edges of reality like sound behind a wall. It wasn't just her name they called anymore. They asked questions. Do you remember where you left it? Why did you lock us out? Who gets to forget and who doesn't? The questions slithered through her skull like steam in a cold room, curling into the hollows behind her ears and staying there. Sometimes the voices mimicked Jonathan. Sometimes they whispered in Lily's voice, though Lily was asleep in the next room. Or so Mary prayed. One night it wasn't a whisper. It was a knock. She froze in bed, staring at the ceiling as the sound echoed down the hallway. 3 soft knocks. Then nothing. She waited. Counted her breaths, and then it came again. This time closer. She stood heart-thudding and crept toward the hall. Harrow had left 3 days earlier, called back to investigate a collapsed archive in a town that had suddenly ceased to exist on paper. She'd left a note: if the knocking comes, don't answer. Not even with thought. That's how it knows. Mary reached the edge of the hallway. All the doors were closed. Lily's, hers, even the back door to the porch. But the knocking came again, clear and firm. This time, not at any door. It was coming from the mirror. The old, foggy one above the fireplace. Mary took one step closer, breath caught in her throat. The knocking repeated. Softer now, more like pleading. And then something happened that broke her completely. The keyhole beneath the mirror, a useless, decorative thing, nothing more than rusted brass, began to whistle, as if air was being pulled through it. Then it spoke, not with a voice, with a thought. Let us in. She ran, locked herself in the pantry, sat with her back against the door until sunrise. She told no one. But the next morning, Lily wouldn't eat. She just stared at her cereal and muttered, "They're getting closer. He's getting tired." Mary didn't ask who. She didn't have to. Jonathan. He had been holding the door shut from the other side. And now he was weakening. Mary found the mirror cracked later that day. One perfect split down the center. Like something had pressed against it from the other side, and the glass had given way just enough to let a memory leak through. That night, Mary didn't sleep again. She began pacing, writing down what she remembered, trying to put the weight of it somewhere else, filling page after page with everything the house had ever shown her. Names she hadn't said aloud, rooms she still saw in dreams, smells that followed her even now: burning dust, damp stone, the iron tang of blood that wasn't always hers. She thought if she could record the memories, maybe they'd stop poisoning her. But the more she wrote, the more she remembered, and the more she remembered, the more the house grew. The next morning, a new door appeared. No warning. Just there, between the kitchen and the laundry closet. Lily found it first. "Mommy," she said quietly. "We didn't have 3 doors yesterday." Mary turned, looked. The third door was plain, wooden, faded green paint, no handle, but there was a keyhole, longer than normal, slightly twisted, like a spiral drilled by something not made for precision. Mary felt herself drawn to it, her fingers tingling with the weight of something unsaid. Lily held her hand. "Don't look into it," she said softly. "That's not your door." Mary fell back, knees buckling. She didn't ask how Lily knew. She just believed her. Later, she ran her fingers along the wall next to the door. It was warm, as if the house were alive again, growing again. And that night, the voices came not from the mirror, but from inside the walls. Mary pressed her ear to the drywall. She heard footsteps, breathing, and the unmistakable sound of something weeping. She snapped away and screamed, drawing Lily into her arms. "We have to go," she said. "Now." But Lily shook her head. "We can't." The door moved. "We're already in it." Mary blinked. "What?" Lily pointed to the window. There was no landscape outside, just fog, not rolling or drifting, but still, like a canvas hung just beyond the glass, like the world had been painted over. "The house came back," Lily whispered, "not through the door, through us." Mary staggered back, realized suddenly the green door wasn't new. It was old, familiar. It had been in her mother's house years ago, locked for as long as she could remember. A door no one ever opened, never questioned. "It's using our memories," Mary whispered. Lily nodded. "It's making a new house out of everything we've ever tried to forget." That was when Mary understood. They hadn't sealed the first house. They had given it the blueprint to build another. And now, piece by piece, room by remembered room, it was assembling itself inside them. Through guilt, through grief, through memory. Mary fell to the floor, hands pressed to her ears. Behind the walls, the voices were laughing. And through the keyhole of the green door, the sound of Jonathan's voice echoed faintly, "Mary, let me out. Please, it's so dark here." Mary didn't move. Couldn't. Her spine was locked in place by fear so old and so deep it didn't even belong to her anymore. It belonged to the house. Because somewhere in that moment, knees on the cold wood floor, breath catching in her throat, Lily silently watching her from the shadowed hallway, Mary realized something she hadn't wanted to admit: the house wasn't just inside her memories. It remembered her too. The green door pulsed, not with light, but with the memory of her mother's voice, soft and distant, like a lullaby Mary hadn't heard since she was 5. The same voice that used to hush her night terrors, the same one that disappeared one night without explanation. That door, sealed and untouched for decades, now lived again. The house had taken it, plucked it from her buried recollections, like a hand rifling through old letters, and it was using her grief as mortar. She crawled backward, away from the door, away from that voice pretending to be Jonathan, her breath tearing out of her in short, ragged gasps. Lily didn't move. "Don't talk to it," she whispered. Mary turned to her daughter, stunned. "How long have you heard him?" "Since the mirror cracked." Mary's skin crawled. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lily looked down at her feet. "Because I knew you'd answer." The worst part, she was right. Mary had wanted to. That voice, so tender, so perfectly him, had cut through her resolve like a hot wire through cloth. Jonathan's voice had always grounded her, pulled her back. It was the tether that had held her together through Lily's birth, through her mother's death, through Ashmere. And now it was being worn by something else. Mary stood slowly, her limbs shaking, and backed away from the green door. "We need to find Harrow." "She won't come," Lily said. "Why not?" "She's forgotten us." Mary blinked. "What?" "She warned you. When you stop remembering the house, it lets go. She didn't want to carry it anymore, so it slipped out of her." Mary's chest went cold. "So we're alone." Lily nodded once, and then, without hesitation, she said, "We have to go deeper." Mary felt her knees buckle again. Deeper into what? "This house. It's not the first house. It's ours. That makes it worse. It's not just made of memories. It's made of us. We can't run from it. We're the ones building it." The idea was too much, too grotesque. That something could feed on her grief, on every ache she tried to forget, and build from it, constructing rooms out of trauma and hallways out of half remembered pain. It was unbearable. But the proof was in front of her. The green door hadn't come from nowhere. It had come from her. So had the cracked mirror. The bedroom that smelled like her father's funeral. The basement that hadn't been there 2 days ago. Each room, a piece of her past she had buried. Each one, now awake again. We don't go deeper, Mary whispered. We burn it down. But even as she said it, the air in the room changed. Thickened. The house didn't like that thought. A light bulb above her head popped, showering them in sparks. Somewhere down the hallway, a picture fell from the wall. The floorboards shifted beneath her feet, not shaking, not rattling, but adjusting. The house was listening. Lily grabbed her hand. If we try to kill it, it'll kill you first. Mary shook her head. Then what do? Lily looked toward the green door. We open it. No. It's the only way. If we face what's behind it, we take back control. We turn a memory into something real. That's the only way to stop it from controlling us. Mary was shaking now, almost dizzy. That voice isn't him. I know, Lily said. But something close to him is trapped behind it. Or something wearing the memory of him. Either way, it's ours now. We either face it, or it keeps building. Mary looked at the green door again. The keyhole was pulsing now, subtle but alive. Jonathan's voice came through again, quieter, closer. I'm tired, Mare. I don't remember the sky. Will you help me come home? Mary stepped forward. Her hand hovered inches from the keyhole. No, Lily whispered. Not you. Me. Mary whipped around. Absolutely not. But Lily was already kneeling. Holding the shard of the mirror they thought they'd left behind in the lighthouse. It hadn't just followed them. It had chosen them. She slid the shard into the long, spiraled keyhole like it was made for it. And it fit. The door opened slowly, groaning like an old throat clearing itself. Behind it was nothing, not darkness, not shadow, nothing. The absence of everything. No walls, no floor. Just the soft sound of breath. Hers, Lily's, and the low whisper of wind that shouldn't have been there. Mary reached for Lily, but her daughter stepped through before she could stop her.
Lily!
No answer. Mary followed. The moment she passed through the threshold, she felt herself tear. Not her body, her mind. Memories spilled out of her like smoke from a broken jar, images she hadn't conjured in years. Her father screaming into the void after her mother's overdose. Her own bleeding hands from the night she'd tried to scratch through the attic wall of Ashmere. The feeling of watching Jonathan take his final step into the well. Each one twisted and looped around her, reforming into the shape of a corridor. Not just any corridor, the one from Ashmere, but older, unfinished, the wood raw, the wallpaper peeled back to show the bones of the house, exposed, vulnerable. Lily was already walking forward. I see it now, she said. Mary followed her gaze. At the far end of the corridor stood a crib, and in the crib, something was crying. Mary moved faster. Each step brought a new memory slamming into her skull. An ache, a scream, a door closing. She stumbled, her knees buckling. The baby's cries grew louder. And when she reached the crib, she saw what it held, not a child, but a mirror. Tiny, round, covered in frost. Inside it, Jonathan's face, and he was sobbing. I can't hold it anymore, he whispered. It's not just me. There's something else in here. Something that's older than the first house. Something that came through before the doors had names. Mary reached for the mirror, but Lily stopped her. No, this is it. This is where it all started. This is the first time someone tried to keep grief. Not feel it, not bury it, but hold it. And it turned into this. Mary stared at the mirror. Jonathan's face warped, darkened. Something moved behind him. Then, the door slammed shut behind them. The slam of the door wasn't just sound. It was finality, a judgment. The kind of closing that echoed not through air, but through bone. Mary spun around, breath snagged mid-chest, heart pounding like a war drum in a too-tight cage. The green door was gone. The corridor they'd stepped into now had no end, no beginning, no exits. Only walls that blotted memory and floors that pulsed like muscle. This wasn't a house anymore. This was a body, a womb, and it was alive. Lily clutched the mirror, still small and frost-covered in her hands. Inside it, Jonathan's face had changed. He no longer looked like the man Mary had married. The features were there, yes, but distorted. Smeared, almost like a portrait ruined by rain. His eyes were wide and wet, his mouth moving without sound, as if he were trapped underwater. "He's not alone in there," Lily whispered. Mary didn't need to ask what she meant. She could feel it now. That knowing presence in the walls. The pressure building in her skull. Whatever Jonathan was holding back, whatever force he had contained within the first house, it hadn't died. It had evolved. Adapted. It had chewed through his soul like gristle, wearing his grief like skin, hollowing out what was human to leave behind, something clever and cruel. And it was watching them now. The corridor pulsed, the floor rippling beneath their feet like breathing earth. Walls narrowed. The mirror in Lily's hands grew hot, pulsing in her grip. The frost began to melt. "We're not in the memory anymore," Mary murmured. "We're in its mind." Lily nodded. "It's dreaming us." The corridor split ahead of them, birthing two paths where one had been. The left oozed with fog, tendrils of memory swirling through the air like smoke from burned photographs. The right was clear but darker, as if the shadows were thick enough to choke on. "We have to split," Lily said before Mary could argue. "No, absolutely not. We're not real to it together," Lily said, her voice distant. "It sees us as one wound, but apart, we confuse it. That's how we'll survive." Mary stared at her. "You're 12. Lily blinked slowly. "Not anymore." Mary didn't know when it had happened. When the softness had drained from her daughter's voice. When the way she looked at the world had stopped being wide-eyed and started being aware. Lily had walked too far into the house's mind. She had seen too much. Mary grabbed her hand and squeezed. "Don't go far," she said. "I'll find you," Lily whispered. "When the house forgets to look." Mary took the left. Immediately, she was swallowed by the fog. It wasn't cold or hot. It was sad, tangible sadness. The kind that wrapped around your throat and reminded you of every mistake you never stopped regretting. She passed a bedroom door from her childhood, half open, revealing a shadow that looked like her mother. Not the woman who raised her, but the one who left her. A shape seated at the edge of a bed, head bowed, whispering apologies that Mary had never heard in life. The room shifted as she stared. The shape looked up. No face, just a mouth and a key, clenched between its teeth. Mary backed away. The door slammed shut. Further down, the corridor bent sharply into a hallway, lit by hanging bulbs that swung slowly, though no wind touched them. They cast dizzying shadows. At the far end, a dining table, one she recognized from her grandmother's house, was set for dinner, but each plate held a different object. A wedding ring, a baby shoe, a clump of her own hair, and in the center, a placard memory is measured by what you leave behind. Mary touched nothing, just walked past, refusing to give in. The house was trying to make her feel, but not to heal, to feed. It didn't want her grief. It wanted her attachment to it. It wanted her to worship what hurt. The floor ahead collapsed. She tumbled through darkness, crashing into a stone chamber. The air here was wet, metallic. Something scraped in the shadows. The mirror shard she'd once held was gone, but in its place, a new reflection shimmered on the water pooling beneath her. Jonathan, or what was left. He stood in the center of the room, back to her. Something moved beneath his skin, bulging and shifting like something wearing him from inside out. When he spoke, his voice echoed like it came from the bottom of a well. "You left the door open, Mare." Mary took a step closer. "You told me to close it." He turned, and she saw his eyes, no longer his, not even close, black as pitch, endless, but behind them, a flicker of blue, a flicker of him. "I did," he said. "But it tricked me. It doesn't want to stay inside. It wants to be believed." Mary stepped forward again. "If you're still in there," she said carefully, "help me stop it." His smile was wrong. "Torn. I can't. It's not mine anymore." but it's still hungry for you. Something rushed from the shadows. Mary was ready to scream, but the scene tore away like peeling paint. She was back in the hallway. No water. No Jonathan. Only Lily, standing at the far end, eyes wide. "I found it," Lily whispered. Mary ran to her. "What?" "The real door. The first one. The one before the house." Mary's blood froze. "Where?" Lily turned and pointed at the space behind her. There was no door, only a wall. But then it blinked. Mary stumbled back. The wall wasn't solid. It rippled, like a membrane. "We don't open it," Mary said. "We don't have to," Lily replied. "It's already opening itself." The wall split, quietly, slowly, revealing a passage that led not forward but inward, into a space without time, without shape. A thought made into a corridor, and at the end of the door, not red, not green, not any color, just blank, as if it had never been painted. Lily whispered, "This is where it was born." Mary's voice cracked. "What?" "The feeling that made the first door. Grief. Unspoken. Unprocessed. Unshared. It had built a door so it could be remembered, and that memory had grown teeth." Mary took Lily's hand. Behind them, the house groaned. Ahead of them, the door waited. No lock, no key. Just a choice. It stood before them in complete silence, the blank door at the center of everything, untouched by color, detail, or even time. It was not built, not carved, not framed. It was formed the way shame is formed, the way fear coils inside a chest and pretends to sleep. The door had no handle, yet both Mary and Lily knew it didn't need one, because it was already partially open. A crack, thin as a breath, ran down its side, and from that space came nothing. Not air, not light, not even cold. Just absence. Not the kind that makes you lonely, the kind that makes you forgotten. Mary couldn't breathe. Her lungs functioned. Her chest rose and fell, but the act of breathing felt foreign. Her body recognized the space as hostile, as if it stood too close to the edge of a world not meant for minds like hers. She gripped Lily's hand tighter, not for comfort, but to remind herself that she still existed. Lily took a step forward. "Wait," Mary whispered, voice barely audible. "We don't know what's behind it." "I do," Lily said. "Or at least the part of me that's not me anymore does." Mary stared at her. The girl's expression was calm, terrifyingly calm. No tremble, no hesitation. Just the hollow determination of someone who had accepted something too large, too deep, and too cruel to explain. Lily wasn't being brave. She was being used. Mary knew it. And the worst part was, so did Lily. This door, Lily continued, was never supposed to be made. It didn't come from a house. It didn't come from grief. It came from refusal. Mary's throat tightened. Refusal. To feel. To remember. Someone long ago had a moment so painful they tried to erase it. Not forget. Not bury. Erase. And that thought? What if I could unmake it? That's what created this. Mary felt her knees weaken. And what's behind it? I don't know, Lily said. Because nothing has ever come back out. They both stared at the crack. For a moment, it flickered, like light trying to push through from the other side. But not warm light. Not hopeful. The kind of light you see in a hospital hallway when the room you fear is just ahead. The kind of light that makes shadows longer. And then something whispered through the gap. Not a voice. A thought. Give it back. Mary stumbled. The weight of it wasn't loud. It was precise. It pierced the places in her brain. She never let herself think about the hour after Jonathan's death she spent in silence, asking herself if she'd pushed him. The years she blamed herself for her mother's overdose. The way she sometimes saw Lily as a reminder, not a miracle. The thought knew all of it. Give what back, Mary whispered. The grief, the memory, the burden. You don't deserve to carry it. You were never strong enough. It wasn't an accusation. It was relief. That's what made Mary want to scream. The voice wasn't threatening to hurt her. It was offering to take it all away. Every scar, every nightmare, every door, every face. I can't, Mary said aloud, trembling. You shouldn't, Lily said beside her. That's how it grows. Every time someone says yes to forgetting, the voice returned, softer now. What has remembering ever done for you? And there it was, the trap. The same promise the first house had whispered to Jonathan. The same seduction Harrow had warned them about. Not horror. Mercy. A kind of mercy too perfect to be real. Mary stepped back. No, she said louder now. You don't want the memory. You want the room it leaves behind. The emptiness. That's what you fill. The crack widened. She hadn't touched it. Neither had Lily. But it heard her, and it was responding. A slow creak rippled through the blank door as it opened inch by inch, revealing not a space, but a moment, hanging in the air like a fragment of time. It was a hospital room. Mary gasped. She knew it instantly. The blue light. The clock that didn't move. The white bed sheets pulled too tight over a still shape. It was the moment her mother died. She'd never seen it, not like this. Her father had told her she'd been too young, but here it was, undeniable. Her mother's hand limp on the edge of the bed, her face pale and calm, as though sleeping. And standing at the edge of the bed was her, a child version of herself. Frozen. Watching the door was showing her the exact second she'd turned her grief into silence. The moment her brain built its first door and locked the pain behind it. Mary turned away. I can't. You must, Lily said. This isn't about stopping it. It's about undoing it. We have to go back to where it started. Mary looked at her, tears thick in her throat. If I feel it, it'll destroy me. No, Lily whispered. If you feel it, it'll have nowhere left to live. Mary stepped through the doorway. Instantly, the hospital room solidified around her. Cold. Sterile. The sound of the ventilator was a flat line. Her younger self stared at her, not surprised, not confused, just waiting. Mary stepped toward her. The moment felt delicate, dangerous. She knelt beside her younger self. I'm sorry, she said. I left you here. The child version of her blinked once. You didn't want me anymore, the child whispered. I couldn't look at you, Mary admitted. You reminded me of her, of what I lost, so I locked you away. Tears ran down her face. The child reached for her. And Mary did the one thing she hadn't done in over 30 years. She hugged her, held her, felt the sobs rise, not as panic, but as permission. And the moment shattered, not with violence, with peace. The hospital room folded in on itself like mist in sunlight. The blank door peeled closed behind her. Mary stood alone in the gray corridor. No more Jonathan, no more voices, just Lily, waiting. You did it, Lily said softly. Mary nodded. And then they both turned. The house was collapsing. Walls that had once pulsed with sorrow now cracked and crumbled. Doors that led to nothing disintegrated like brittle leaves. The very floor beneath their feet hummed one last time, then stilled. And the keyhole at the center of the green door closed, for the first time, tightly, silently. But in the silence that followed, Lily whispered something that sent a new shiver crawling up Mary's spine. We closed our door. Mary looked at her. What do you mean? Lily looked down. But there are still others. The silence after the collapse was almost holy. It stretched through Mary like cool water through cracks and fevered skin. Calming, slow, healing. But it was not peace. It was the kind of silence that lingers after a truth too large has been spoken aloud. The kind of quiet that follows a scream buried for decades. She stood in what remained of the corridor, if it could still be called that. The walls were pale now, colorless and soft, as though memory had been gently drained from their fibers. The mirror in Lily's hands had gone dark. The weight of grief had been lifted. Yes, but in its place came a different burden. They hadn't closed every door. They had only closed theirs. And in that realization, Mary felt something else creeping in. Connection. Not the emotional kind. Not love or warmth or understanding. No, this was deeper. A structural connection. A terrible, unrelenting understanding that all across the world, behind walls and under floorboards, beneath beds, and at the edges of mirrors, doors just like theirs waited. Some open. Some sealed. and some pretending to be something else entirely. Lily said it first. There are more houses. Mary turned to her slowly, wary of the tone. Not like Ashmere, Lily continued. Not like the first house. These ones were built, but shaped from the same memory. Different places, same hunger. Mary's heart dropped. You mean they were designed to become like it? Lily nodded. When someone tried to hide their pain, or bury someone else's. Those moments, the ones too sharp to hold, they get locked in rooms. And rooms make houses. Mary breathed in slowly, feeling it again, that weight. The whispering in the corners of her vision. Not voices this time, but shapes. A sense of being observed, not by eyes, but by space itself. They're linked, she whispered. All of them. A network. Lily glanced down at the mirror shard, still nestled in her palm like a sleeping creature. They're not just houses, they're parts of something bigger. Like limbs. Like organs. Mary wanted to deny it. Wanted to tell her daughter she was wrong. But deep down, she knew Lily had seen farther than she ever could. Lily had touched the marrow of the house's truth, and the house had touched back. They made their way out through a door that hadn't been there before. Not one of their memories, not one the house had made. But something new, neutral. Like the house, having consumed its share of their story, was now releasing them. But not out of mercy, out of disinterest. They were finished. Not saved, finished. The cabin was still there when they stepped through, no longer suspended in fog or folding into itself. Just a cabin. A place with creaky floorboards, dust on the shelves, and the faint scent of pine. Harrow was waiting. She stood at the edge of the clearing, her coat buttoned to her neck, eyes glassy with time. She said nothing at first, just looked at them like she wasn't sure they were real. Then she asked, "Did you find it?" Mary didn't answer, not with words. She just nodded once, slowly. Harrow's shoulders slumped, not in relief, but in mourning. So, she said, the first has been silenced. Not destroyed, Lily said. Harrow met her eyes. No, not destroyed. That's never been possible. But you cut the root. That's more than anyone's ever done. Mary approached her carefully. Why didn't you warn us about the network? Harrow looked tired then. Old in a way Mary hadn't seen before. As if she'd been carrying this knowledge for far longer than she ever let on. I couldn't, she said, because to speak of one door is to awaken the next. That's how it survives. Not just through memory. Through mention. Through belief. Mary felt the room close in again. So what now? Harrow exhaled. Now we make a decision. You can stay here, pretend the door never opened. Go on with life and pray that no one else remembers. And if we don't, then we find the others. The wind picked up outside, brushing the cabin's old shutters with the same careful rhythm as breath through teeth. Mary looked at her daughter, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Lily smiled. A small, wary smile. But real. They're waiting, she said. Harrow stepped back, opened a bag she'd brought with her, and pulled out a folder, thick and yellowed with time. Inside were photographs, notes, floor plans. All the same theme, places people had left behind, but never forgotten. An apartment in Philadelphia where the same knock was heard every night at 2:12 a.m. A suburban home in Oregon where the furniture never stayed in the same place 2 nights in a row. A gas station bathroom in New Mexico where people emerged sobbing without knowing why. Mary leafed through them, her fingers trembling. Each page felt like a heartbeat. Each one a door. You don't have to, Harrow said. But if you don't, someone else will. Alone. Mary looked out the window, into the gray morning light. The silence outside wasn't peace. It was potential. It was waiting. She thought of Jonathan. Of the scream he never let out. Of the weight he carried so no one else had to. She wouldn't let it grow again. Not if she could help it. Mary turned, looked at Harrow, then at Lily. Where's the next one? Harrow opened a map. There's a door in Missouri. A church that was sealed in 1943. No one remembers why. Lily whispered, but the house does. Mary nodded. Then that's where we go. They packed that night. No farewells. No journal entries. No long goodbyes. Just a map, a memory, and a car headed toward the next scar the world had tried to hide. Because now they understood, it wasn't about fighting the house. It was about witnessing the places where people had tried to forget pain so badly. They'd accidentally made a place for it to live. And the house, it was still hungry. But now, finally, someone was hungry back. The road to Missouri was long and unkind. The kind that stretched wider the closer you got to the middle of nowhere. The map Harrow had given them was hand-marked, annotated in sharp slashes of red ink, with strange instructions written in the margins. Don't approach until sunset, and beneath it, the bells don't ring anymore, but the sound still lingers. None of it made sense. Not until they reached the old gravel road, flanked by dry cornfields, and spotted the steeple rising through the dusky air like a crooked finger pointing at something above that didn't want to be seen. It wasn't just any church. It was abandoned on purpose. You could feel it. Not just neglected, not forgotten, left behind. Like a room where something too awful had happened, and no one could bear to ever touch it again. It squatted at the edge of a collapsing cemetery. Stone walls cracked, front doors rotting inward, like they had been pulled open 1,000 times too many, and were now permanently stuck in the shape of surrender. A broken welcome. A last gasp. Mary stepped out of the car first. She could already feel the heat pressing in strange places. Beneath her eyes, behind her knees, inside her teeth. It wasn't the sun. The sun had dipped below the tree line. This heat was memory, an echo of something awful. Something hallowed and hollow all at once. Lily didn't wait. She walked toward the church steps like she was meeting someone she already knew. "Lily," Mary called, "wait for me." But her daughter was already touching the door, not pushing it, not pulling it, just resting her palm against the wood like it might recognize her. And when she did, Mary heard it, the bell, not in the air, in her chest, a dull, slow clang. Like the memory of a sound she'd never heard, but always feared. The vibration of it rolled through her ribs and down into her stomach, as if something ancient were reaching through time and pressing a sound into her from the inside out. She stepped beside Lily. The door creaked. Not because they opened it, but because it opened itself. Inside was dark. Of course it was. But it wasn't empty. The pews remained, coated in dust and the brittle husks of insects long dead. The altar had collapsed in on itself, its stone crumbled into chunks like old teeth. But what drew Mary's eye wasn't the ruin. It was the people. Not alive. Not fully. They sat in the pews, 20 or 30 of them, motionless, all facing forward. Their clothes were wrong era, wrong colors, like they'd been pulled from different decades. Some wore funeral blacks, some white wedding gowns streaked with age. All of them had heads bowed, and not one of them moved. Lily didn't seem afraid. "They've been listening," she said softly. Mary whispered back, "To what?" Lily didn't answer, because the whispering had already begun. It rolled down from the rafters like fog, thick and heavy and wet. Dozens of voices, no versions of voices, some broken by age, others childlike and shrill. And all of them saying the same thing, "Do you forgive me?" Mary's heart stumbled. The voices weren't demanding forgiveness. They were begging for it. Pleading like children at the edge of punishment, but the punishment had already come, long ago. The words weren't directed at anyone. They were directed everywhere. Mary stepped forward, past the still congregation, toward the pulpit. There, nailed to the wall behind where the altar used to be, was a door, not part of the original building. You could tell by the wood, too smooth, too pale, almost fresh in its wrongness, no frame. Just there, stuck to the stone like a scab over a wound, there was writing burned into it. One word: repent. She felt it before she saw it. The shift. The pews behind her creaked as the seated figures began to move, not fully. Just heads lifting, shoulders straightening, They didn't turn toward her. They turned toward the door. Lily gripped Mary's hand. It's using them. Like we used the first house to store our grief, this place is filled with guilt. Mary stared at the pale door. This one's built on shame. Lily nodded. And they can't leave because they won't let themselves be forgiven. Mary knew that feeling too well. The idea that healing was something for other people. That pain was something you earned. That suffering was the price for mistakes you'd already made and couldn't take back. That was the trick of the church. It didn't trap the guilty. It waited for the guilty to trap themselves. And then it fed on that. Lily let go of her hand and stepped toward the pale door. Don't, Mary said quickly, fear burning her throat. But Lily's eyes were wide, dazed. I think this one remembers Dad. Mary went cold. He was never here, no, Lily said, but he felt this way. About Nathan, about what happened. And that kind of guilt leaves fingerprints. Mary stepped between her and the door. Then we don't open it. Lily blinked slowly. It's already open. We just can't see inside until we feel what it wants us to remember. Behind them, the congregation began to weep. Still motionless, still seated, but weeping. And the sound was unbearable. Mary turned and shouted at them, an instinct, a reflex, anything to break the hold. What do you want from us? A voice answered, clear and singular from the back of the church. I want you to admit what you did. Mary spun. It wasn't one of the seated. It was Jonathan, or something close. He stood in the doorway now, dressed in the black funeral suit he wore when Nathan died. Pale, hollow-eyed. You left me, he said. Not in the first house. Before that. When I told you about what happened, and you didn't believe me. Mary's legs trembled. I didn't know how to. You didn't try, he said. You turned away. And that's what the house remembers. That's what this church was built on. Lily stepped beside him, not afraid. Sad. This isn't Dad, she said. It's his guilt, made into a mask. Mary closed her eyes, trembling. Then how do we stop it? Lily touched the door. We forgive him. Mary looked up. We already did. No, Lily said. We never said it. The weeping grew louder, almost joyful, not peaceful, not safe. Just relieved. Mary stepped forward. She looked at the hollow-eyed version of her husband, and though she knew it wasn't real, her voice cracked like it was. I forgive you, John. The door shuddered. Lily whispered again. Mary screamed at this time. IFR Joe, you. And the door opened. No light, just a void, and within it, a heart, still beating, not human, not literal, but alive and covered in locks, each one labeled with the name of a town or a year or a person. Memories. Sealed, waiting. This was the core, not of the house, not of this church, but of the network itself. The thing that connected every door, every forgotten room. The lockbox of human guilt. Mary stepped forward. Lily took her hand. Behind them, the congregation fell still, and ahead, the heart began to crack. It cracked, not like glass, not like ice, but like a mind coming apart after years of holding back the truth. The heart behind the pale door didn't bleed. It wept. A low, pulsing shudder echoed from within it, like distant thunder trapped beneath skin. And with each tremor, a lock unlatched. Not with violence, with recognition. Each click was a memory admitting it had been hidden too long. Mary and Lily didn't speak. They stood at the edge of the doorway, barely breathing, watching something both grotesque and sacred unfold. The heart wasn't made of flesh or muscle. It was composed of everything people never said out loud. Sins whispered into pillows. Confessions scrawled in unsent letters. Every cracked photo frame, every prayer muttered through clenched teeth. Regrets that never had time to become apologies. All of it had been sealed into this one beating construct, tucked behind a door painted with shame, guarded by those who had refused to forgive themselves. The last lock fell, and the heart stopped, not in death, in decision, because now it saw them. The silence that followed was not peace, it was judgment, not from a god or a ghost, but from the raw force of memory itself. Mary could feel it pulling at her, asking the questions no one wanted to be asked. What have you buried so deep you forgot it was yours? What pain have you made into a room? What door have you built and called a wall? And just like that, the floor beneath them turned to ash. The pulpit, the pews, the weeping congregation, all crumbled into dust as if the church had never been a building, but a memory wearing the costume of one. The heart pulsed once more, and in that moment it invited them inside. Lily stepped forward first. Lily, Mary reached for her, but her daughter had already crossed the threshold, and then Mary followed. The inside of the heart was not a room, it was a corridor, an endless, spiraling loop of doors, wooden, metal, glass, some rotted, some clean, each with a name etched into them. Not always a full name, sometimes just a face, a scent, a phrase only one person would ever understand. These weren't just memories, these were guilt boxes, and each was still sealed. But one door near them was different. It was ajar. Mary stepped toward it, and something shifted. The air grew heavy. The sound around her faded into a single whisper, her own voice, recorded from a time she could barely remember. I wish she hadn't been born. Mary staggered. No, that wasn't real. That wasn't. But it was. She remembered now. The night Jonathan had fallen asleep at the kitchen table after another long silence. Mary had stood in the hallway outside Lily's room, overwhelmed, scared, cracking in places no one could see. And she had whispered it into the dark, just once, not meaning it, not believing it, but needing the release. A moment of weakness, a sentence made of exhaustion, and the house had kept it, turned it into a door, a memory she had hidden so deep even she had forgotten. Lily said nothing. She didn't look at Mary, didn't blink, just walked ahead. But the silence between them changed. Mary stepped into the room, and there she was, herself, curled in the corner, years younger, sobbing with hands over her ears, muttering the same sentence over and over. A loop, a wound with no exit. Mary knelt beside her, her own presence shaking, fragile. I didn't mean it, she said softly. The curled version of her didn't stop crying. I didn't mean it, she repeated, louder still, no change. Then, finally, she screamed at Ichichocer, IWLDKOCRIN, and the crying stopped, the loop ended. The room flickered once, then vanished. The heart groaned behind her, another layer of it unraveling. Not violently, almost gratefully. Lily was waiting at the next door. This one's mine, she said. Mary didn't ask. Lily stepped through, and this room was a hallway, lit only by moonlight, lined with mirrors. Each reflection was a different version of Lily, one that had run away, one that had stayed with Jonathan when he'd asked her to walk into the first house, one that had died in the fire Lily barely remembered but had always feared. Every mirror was a choice never taken, and in each one, Lily's eyes were empty. Mary stepped beside her. You didn't make those choices, she said. But I thought about them, Lily whispered. And the heart remembers what we think, even if we never speak it. Mary reached out, placed her hand on Lily's shoulder. You're here. You faced it. That's more than most people ever do. The mirrors began to crack, one by one, quietly, like snow underfoot. Lily closed her eyes. When she opened them, the room was gone. The heart pulsed again, louder now. It was dying, but not in suffering. In relief. In release. The corridor changed. The doors peeled back into walls, the walls into wind, the wind into nothing. And then, suddenly, Mary and Lily were standing in the middle of the old church again. But now, it was morning. Sunlight streamed through broken stained glass windows, and the church looked small, harmless, a skeleton of its former self. There were no figures in the pews, no whispering in the rafters, no doors. Just light and silence. And freedom. Harrow stood in the back corner, where the shadows still lingered. You made it, she said. Mary turned, startled. You knew we'd find the heart. Harrow shook her head. I hoped you would. No one else ever has. Mary stepped forward. It's still alive, isn't it? Harrow's eyes darkened. It's dying. but not gone. It can't be gone until every door is closed. Every wound faced, and most people don't want to open them. Lily looked up. But we can. And Harrow smiled, not warmly, not cruelly, just honestly. You're the first pair to walk out of a memory and into yourselves. Mary looked back once at the church, now quiet and broken. Nothing but a whisper in the world's spine. Then she turned to Harrow. Where's the next door? Harrow held out a small, rusted key. It smelled like salt water. There's a place in Maine, she said. A boarded-up lighthouse. The light never stops turning. Not even when there's no power. Lily took the key, and Mary nodded, because now they weren't just survivors. They were seekers. And the house, every piece of it, every shape it wore, was still waiting to be unmade. They arrived just before the fog swallowed the road. Maine was gray, the kind of gray that seeped under the skin, that crawled into the back of your throat and stayed there. The ocean whispered like a rumor no one wanted to admit was true, low and rhythmic, always just out of reach. The lighthouse stood crooked at the edge of the bluff, clinging to the rocks like a corpse that had died trying to stand. It should have been dead. Its windows were shattered, the walls flaking with salt and time, and yet the light still turned. Round and round, no pause, no source. Just that endless beam scanning the sea that no longer came close. It doesn't make sense, Mary muttered as they parked on the gravel road below. There's no power. Harrow stepped out behind them. That's not the light you're thinking of. Mary turned, chilled. Then what is it? The last memory, Harrow said, her voice like frost, before he jumped. Lily froze beside her. You mean someone died here? Harrow nodded slowly. They all did. But this one, he kept falling. The air tensed. There was no name on the lighthouse, no plaque, no history to claim. Just rust and silence and that circling light. The steps up the bluff were worn and brittle, as if hundreds had passed this way but none had ever truly arrived. Mary took the lead. Lily followed close. Harrow stayed behind, her role not as a guide this time, but as a witness. She had seen too many doors and knew this one wasn't hers. The lighthouse loomed the closer they got. Not taller, not wider, just heavier, like grief pressed into stone. The door was iron, rusted nearly shut, but it gave with a groan that sounded like breath escaping a grave. Inside, the air was thick with salt and mold and something far worse. Regret. Not the emotion. The presence. You could feel it hanging in the spiral stairwell, like fog with teeth. It's at the top, Lily said, already starting upward. Mary grabbed her arm. Don't get ahead of me. But Lily wasn't really listening. She climbed, step after echoing step, each footfall swallowed by the tower. The beam of light spun from the top, cutting through the fog outside, casting shadows that stretched far too long inside. They reached the top platform after what felt like hours, though Mary knew it had only been minutes. The room wasn't empty. A man stood at the glass, his back to them. His clothes were soaked, not from water, but memory. Torn, faded, stuck in the era they were born from. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge their presence. The light passed right through him every rotation, revealing something horrible each time it touched his silhouette. His face, reflected briefly in the glass, was always falling. Not screaming, not flailing, just falling. Mary stepped forward. Who is he? Lily whispered, he doesn't remember. The man twitched then. A single movement, like the pull of a puppet string. He turned halfway, enough for Mary to see that his face wasn't whole, not bloodied, not broken, just unfinished. As though grief had started to carve him and then stopped, leaving a hollow suggestion of someone who had once been loved. He finally spoke. I jumped. But I never landed. Mary's breath caught. The air in the room thickened, pressing against her ears. She reached for Lily instinctively, but her daughter didn't flinch. Why? Lily asked softly. The man looked at her, or tried to. His eyes couldn't hold still. Because it was easier to fall than to remember what I left behind. Mary suddenly felt it, the pull. The same sensation she'd had at the first house. The draw of surrender, the promise of silence. This whole lighthouse, she murmured, it's a loop. The man nodded, the fall and the guilt. He raised a hand, pointed at the spinning light. I tried to forget. But forgetting became the only thing I remembered. The fall kept happening. The moment stretched out forever. Mary turned to Lily. This place isn't a prison. It's a purgatory. And he made it, Lily added, like all of them. He made the lighthouse to escape the memory of what he did. Mary looked back. What did you do? The man didn't speak. Instead, the light spun again, and with its passage, a window opened. Not in the tower, in the air. A fragment of the past, sharp as glass, slicing into the moment like a blade. They saw a child. Barefoot, sobbing, running down the rocky cliff. A scream followed. The man's. And then the light spun again. The window closed. Mary blinked hard, forcing the tears back. He didn't mean to let her fall. Lily looked up. But he blames himself anyway. The man turned fully now, his unfinished face flickering in and out of focus. I was watching the sea. Not her. She slipped. And in the moment I reached to grab her, I hesitated. The wind outside howled. And she was gone. Mary swallowed hard. The beam of light stuttered for the first time. Hiccuped. Then resumed. He built the lighthouse to keep watch, Lily whispered. To watch forever. To never look away again. But he's still falling, Mary said. And she's still gone. The man nodded. Because I won't forgive myself. Lily stepped closer. And that's what feeds the house, isn't it? Not what we did. What we refused to forgive. The man looked at her. And in that moment, Mary saw it. He wasn't alone. Behind him, just out of reach, a second figure hovered in the spinning light. Small, fragile. A child. Not moving. Not fading. Just watching him. Not angry, just waiting. Mary took a step closer to the edge. She never blamed you. The man's voice cracked. I blamed me. Then stop, she said gently. Let the light stop turning. The man turned back to the window, looked at the sea. And for the first time he breathed. The beam of light faltered again. This time it stopped. The tower shook, not violently, but like a sigh held too long finally escaped. The air cleared, and the man was gone, so was the girl. Only the empty lighthouse remained. No ghost, no door, just silence. Mary looked at Lily, and Lily looked at the sky. The fog was gone, the sea was back. Real waves, real air, real sun. The house had let go of this place. Another knot untied. Another door closed. And far below, at the edge of the bluff, Harrow stood beside a new folder. This time she didn't speak. She simply held it out. Mary opened it slowly. A hospital in Detroit. Abandoned since 1982. They said the patients still screamed at night, except it had no power, no staff, and hadn't seen a human soul in decades. Mary took the file. Lily met her eyes, and together they stepped off the bluff into the wind. The house hadn't stopped hunting, but neither had they. Detroit didn't look abandoned until you looked too close. The buildings still stood. The roads still curved like veins through the city's hollow bones, but nothing breathed. Not really. And nestled in the northern stretch of forgotten neighborhoods stood it. The hospital no one remembered building. There were no signs, no streetlights nearby, and yet every road seemed to lead toward it if you let your thoughts drift too far. The structure loomed in shades of rust and shadow, rising out of the weeds like it had been left behind by something ancient and angry. Mary parked across the street, but she didn't turn off the engine. For a long time, she simply stared. The windows were all blacked out, not shattered, not broken. Just dark, like the glass was hungry and didn't want to reflect the world anymore. The building didn't pulse with presence like the first house or thrum like the lighthouse. It did something worse. It waited. Why a hospital? Lily asked, her voice soft, a little hoarse from hours on the road. Mary answered before she could stop herself. Because nothing hides a scream like a hospital. They stepped out together, the echo of their footfalls muffled by the layers of dust coating the sidewalk. Harrow trailed behind them, a reluctant shadow. She didn't speak much now. The more doors they closed, the more withdrawn she became. As if the further they ventured, the closer they were getting to something she was trying not to face. The hospital's doors, unsurprisingly, were unlocked. Not open, just ready. Inside, the air was thick with antiseptic and mildew, a mix that suggested something had once been cleaned here, scrubbed obsessively, but never made clean. The floors were smeared with boot prints that never let out. The wheelchairs stood too straight in corners, facing walls instead of windows. Stretchers were left mid-hallway like their passengers had simply vanished mid-transfer. "This place doesn't smell dead," Lily whispered. "It smells stopped." She was right. The hospital didn't feel haunted. It felt paused. Mary walked slowly, brushing her fingers along the wall as they passed a nurse's station, long abandoned. But then she felt something strange, like her fingers were dipping through the paint. She pulled back. There was no wall behind it, just fabric. They all watched in stunned silence as the wallpaper began to peel itself, revealing not plaster, but hospital curtains, dirty, yellowed, and swaying gently as though someone had just walked past them. Then came the sound, the beep of a heart monitor. Dull, flat, then rising. It wasn't coming from any room. It was coming from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, the floor. The hospital had begun to remember. And with that memory came movement. From the corners, from the gurneys, from the shadows behind open doors, figures began to stir. Not in violence. In pain. Endless, lurching pain. Limbs shaking, IVs dragging, mouths opening to scream without sound. Mary gripped Lily's arm. "They're not alive." Lily didn't blink. They never left. And then she saw it, the door at the end of the hallway. Different from the rest. White. Impossibly white. So bright it glowed, yet cast no light. It was the cleanest thing in the hospital, and it pulsed gently, like a heartbeat trying to convince itself it still had purpose. "That's it," Lily whispered. "That's the room." Mary hesitated. "Do we open it?" "We have to." They stepped through the swarm of ghost patients who reached toward them not to grab, but to plead. Their mouths opened in unending moans, but their faces bore the same expression. "Remember me." Mary touched the white door. It opened without effort, and inside was a hospital room. Pristine, smelling of bleach and soap and fresh linens. And in the bed, hooked to machines that hummed too loud and breathed too slow, lay Jonathan. Mary staggered. No, he's gone. But there he was, alive, breathing, eyes closed, young. Lily stepped beside her. "He's not really here. It's a version, a sliver. The part of him that refused to die because you never let him." Mary couldn't speak, because it was true. She had never buried Jonathan. Not completely. She held on to the idea that maybe, just maybe, if she never forgave herself, she could keep him alive. Even as grief, even as guilt. And the hospital, this place built on unfinished ends and paused pain, had fed on that. The machines pulsed. The figure in the bed stirred, and then opened his eyes. "Mary," it said. She shook her head. "You're not him." "No," the figure agreed. "But I am the part you refused to let die." Mary felt her knees give out. Lily caught her, helped her sit at the edge of the bed. "I tried," Mary whispered. "I did everything right after. I raised her. I kept going. I tried to be okay. But you never let yourself grieve," the figure said. "You made grief a room. You made pain a corridor. You made this." He gestured to the glowing door. "A hospital." Lily stepped forward. "So how do we undo it?" The figure looked at her gently. "You let me go." Mary sobbed raw and sudden. "I don't know how." "You do," it said. "You just never wanted to." Mary leaned forward, took the hand of the thing that wasn't Jonathan, but still was. And for the first time, she let herself weep without holding anything back. No control, no restraint. Just full-body sorrow, purging every moment she'd buried. The figure smiled, and began to fade. The machines flatlined. The glow dimmed. The door behind them closed, not with force, not with finality. With grace. When they turned back, the hospital was no longer filled with figures. The beds were empty. The stretchers cleared. The halls silent. Time had resumed. Grief had passed. The house had fed and finally let go. Mary and Lily stood alone in the quiet. Then Harrow appeared at the entrance, folder in hand. This time, there was no file. Just one photograph. A house in a desert, no path to it. No exit from it. And beneath it, scribbled in sharp black ink, the one we don't enter unless we're ready for it to end. Mary stared at it, heart pounding. Lily met her eyes. And in silence they nodded. The next door would be the final one. The desert stretched out like a scar, burned into the earth by something too cruel to be natural. Sand curled in endless spirals, not from wind, but from memory, thick with heat, heavy with silence. It wasn't the kind of place anyone passed through by accident. The roads didn't lead here. The sun didn't shine here, not really. Even in daylight, the sky above the horizon refused to commit to blue or gray. Everything felt like it was waiting for something terrible to begin again. And at the center of it, surrounded by cracked earth and shifting dust, stood the house. It wasn't tall. It wasn't grand. It wasn't even menacing. It just stood there, utterly still, perfectly symmetrical. And what made it worse, far worse, was the absence that clung to it. It cast no shadow. Not even when the sun sat directly behind it. Not even when Lily stood 3 feet away from its wall and watched the light pass through her, but not the wood beside her. Mary stood just behind her. Fists clenched, breath shallow. "This is the last one," she whispered, "isn't it?" Harrow, who hadn't spoken since Detroit, finally nodded. This house wasn't made by grief, or guilt, or shame. This one is made of denial. Lily turned to her. "Whose?" Harrow's voice cracked. "Everyone's." Mary stepped forward slow, like approaching a coffin that hadn't been nailed shut. The closer she came, the colder the air became, not in temperature, but in tone. Emotion seemed to fall off her shoulders. No fear, no sorrow, just numbness, as if the house was preparing her to forget. And then the door opened. Not outward, not inward. It simply peeled back, like paper catching fire in reverse. No sound, no creak. Just the vanishing of what stood between them and what waited inside. The interior was pure white, not sterile, not clean, just blank, like a memory before it takes shape. They stepped inside one by one, and the door, if it could be called that, closed behind them, leaving no seam, no line, no proof it had ever been there. The air was thicker inside, but not oppressive, more like air that had been left untouched for decades, still, unbreathed. There were no walls, no corners, just distance, and in that endless white, a single figure sat cross-legged on the floor. Lily was the first to recognize him. Her breath hitched. Nathan. Mary's vision blurred. It was him, younger alive. Smiling in a way he hadn't since before the first house. "Nathan," she whispered, stepping forward. Hard in her throat. But he didn't look up. He kept drawing something into the floor, over and over, his fingers tracing invisible lines. Not with chalk or pencil or blood, just with intention. The kind that makes you think, maybe, if you repeat it enough, you can change the past. Mary dropped to her knees beside him. "Nathan, it's me." Still, he didn't look. She turned to Harrow. "What is this?" Harrow spoke softly. "He's not real. Not anymore. He's the last door. The one we never opened, because doing so would mean admitting it was always going to end this way." Lily stepped closer. "But we've faced everything." "No," Harrow said. "You faced what you remembered, what you could feel. But this is what you refused to feel." Mary turned back to the boy. His face was younger than the last time she'd seen it. He was the age he'd been before the accident, before the house. And still, he traced the same shape over and over: a house, a smaller figure beside it, and a wide, endless horizon. "He's trying to remember the way out," Lily said. Mary's voice broke. "There is no way out." "Exactly," Harrow whispered. And the truth landed like a hammer. Mary had believed she could fix it. believed if she grieved hard enough, forgave deep enough, fought long enough, she could untangle the past, undo it, save him. But Nathan hadn't been trapped by the first house. He'd been taken by what built the first house. A single moment, a flash of rage, of neglect, of distraction, whatever the reason, it had happened. And this place, this blank, hollow, whisperless house, it was where that truth lived. The place that remembered the final, terrible fact that some doors close not because you walk through them, but because you didn't watch the child behind you. Mary broke then, not gently, not gracefully. She collapsed into the floor beside him, and the scream that left her throat didn't echo. It folded in on itself, swallowed by the white. She wept like someone who'd only just learned her child had died. Because in some way she had. Grief is a long road, yes, but acceptance is the final fall. Lily knelt beside her, tears streaming silently. And for the first time, the boy looked up, not with joy, not with anger, just knowing. "I missed you," he said softly. Mary could barely speak. "I never let you go, I know." He reached out, touched her hand, and the white began to fade. Not all at once, not violently, just quietly, like fog when the sun finally has the strength to rise. Shapes formed. Walls, corners, sky. The house didn't vanish. It resolved into nothing more than what it had always been. An empty house. A shell. A pause. And as Mary stood, she saw no door, no light. Just Lily still there, still alive, still choosing to walk forward with her. Harrow waited outside, leaning against the car. When they returned, she didn't ask what they saw. She just handed Mary the last page. No photograph, no location. Just a question: what door do you think Yo-Yo left open? Mary folded the paper, put it in her pocket, then looked at her daughter. "Where do you want to go now?" Lily smiled through tears. "Wherever we haven't been yet." And as the sun finally broke over the desert, casting shadows that hadn't existed in years, the house behind them vanished. Not into smoke, not into legend, but into the quiet, terrible place that lives between memory and mercy. And for the first time in years, they weren't running from the house anymore. They were walking ahead of it. The town wasn't on any map. The road signs leading to it had long since vanished, stolen by time or buried by things that preferred to be left unspoken. Yet there it was, nestled between forested hills that held no birdsong and a sky that always seemed a little too close to the ground. Mary didn't know how they found it, or why she suddenly recognized the curve of the hills, the bend in the river. But she did. It came with the kind of sharp, stabbing familiarity that memories sometimes carry. The ones you've buried so deep. They only come back when they're ready to hurt. They didn't need Harrow to point the way this time. The house at the edge of the town found them. It was plain, small, painted in the faded yellow of old Polaroids, a house you'd forget if you walked past it too quickly. And maybe that's why it had lasted so long, because no one ever looked too close. But Mary couldn't look away. The porch creaked under her feet. The air was thick with static, the kind that always comes before a storm, even when the sky is still. There was no wind. Not even the trees swayed. And the door was open. Not unlocked, open. As if someone had known they were coming. Lily stepped in first. She hadn't said a word since they crossed the bridge into town. Something about this place made her quieter than usual. Not frightened, just listening. The house smelled like rain, not the real kind, the kind that lives in memory. Wet pavement, damp clothes. The smell of summer interrupted. There were no lights, but somehow they could see everything. Every room frozen in time. Toys in the corner. Dishes in the sink. A photograph crooked on the wall. Of a boy. He couldn't have been older than 7, and Mary recognized him instantly. But it wasn't Nathan. It was someone else. A name formed in her throat, but she couldn't speak it. Not yet. Her legs carried her forward before her mind could catch up. And then, down the hall, the sound came. Not a whisper. Not a cry, just a drip. Water. Dripping from nowhere. But every time she tried to trace the sound, it moved. Lily followed it too, eyes narrowed. Her fingers brushed the walls, and each time she touched them, they seemed to breathe beneath her palm. Like the house wasn't made of wood, but of waiting. At the end of the hallway was a door, painted blue. Not the soft, welcoming kind. The deep blue of oceans too dark to swim. Mary reached for the knob and paused, because she remembered. This door, she had seen it before. As a child, in dreams. In fevered memories she never told anyone about. Because this was the house she used to draw when she was small. The one she never lived in. The one she never told her parents about. The one that called to her whenever the rain came. Her hand trembled, but she opened it. Inside was a boy, not a ghost, not a memory, a boy, sitting on the floor, watching the ceiling. Drip, drip, drip. He didn't flinch, didn't turn, he just spoke. You left me. Mary's breath caught in her throat. No, I don't. You did, he said, calmly. You forgot me, and when the house came for you, you let it take me instead. Lily stepped beside her. Who is he? Mary dropped to her knees. The memory hit like a fist to the ribs. He's me. Lily blinked. What? Mary stared at the boy, his face, his clothes, the way he sat. He's the part I left behind when I was little. When I saw something I wasn't supposed to. When I heard something I couldn't understand. I shut it out. I sealed it off. And I made a version of myself to sit here and carry it. The boy finally looked at her. His eyes were dark, not empty. Full. Of everything she hadn't wanted to remember. Do you want to see? He asked. Mary nodded, and the walls fell away. Suddenly she was small again. The house changed, grew. Now it wasn't just her memory, it was her mind, turned inside out. Every hallway a moment, every room a buried day. She saw her mother crying in the bathroom, her father screaming on the phone, a cupboard full of letters she was never allowed to open, a closet she was locked in when she asked too many questions, and outside the window, the house. Always waiting, always watching. The boy stood beside her now. You made me so you wouldn't feel it. Mary wept. I'm sorry. He didn't move. You left me here for 30 years. I didn't mean to. I know, he said. But now it's time. Time for what? He walked to the window. Outside, the rain had started, and it was falling up. Torrents of water pulling into the sky, like time rewinding, like grief escaping the ground. Time to let me grow up, he said. And with that, he walked into her. Not through her. Into her. And she gasped, suddenly filled with memories she didn't recognize but knew were hers. The feeling of being small and powerless, of shutting down to survive, of waiting, quietly, for someone to come back for her. Lily caught her as she stumbled, and the house she'd drawn as a child, shuddered once. Then began to fall apart, not collapse, unbuild, each wall dissolving, each room folding back into itself. The blue door was last, and when it vanished, so did the rain. Mary stood outside with Lily now, on the edge of the ghost town that had never really existed. The sun was overhead. No clouds, no fog. Harrow was already walking down the dirt road. She didn't turn to speak, just raised her hand, holding one last envelope. Mary opened it slowly. Inside was a photo of her own house, present day, whole, untouched. But the back had a note written in Lily's handwriting. One word, return. Mary looked at her daughter. Lily nodded. And for the first time since this all began, Mary realized they weren't looking for more doors. They were going home. But home wasn't the end of the road. It was the beginning of the truth. They didn't speak during the drive home. Not because there was nothing to say, but because some words have to wait. Mary kept her eyes on the road while Lily stared out the window, her reflection following alongside trees that blurred like memories. The sky was too quiet, not empty, just hushed, as if the world knew something sacred was about to happen and didn't want to interrupt. It had been years since Mary had seen their old house in the daylight. She hadn't expected to feel anything when she pulled into the driveway. But the moment the tires crunched gravel and the porch came into view, it hit her. Not like a jolt, but like something tightening behind her ribs. The house looked the same, too much the same. The paint still peeled in the same corner. The upstairs curtain still hung just slightly crooked, as if a hand had brushed it aside and never fixed it. And for a moment, she wondered if someone had been keeping it ready, waiting. Lily stepped out first. She didn't wait for Mary. She walked straight to the front door and pressed her hand to it. "It's awake," she said. Mary didn't ask how she knew. She felt it too. This wasn't just a building anymore. It was a witness. A still, living page of everything they had written in silence. Every fight. Every apology. Every night Mary had screamed into her pillow, and every morning she smiled too hard at breakfast to make up for it. This was where Nathan had laughed the first time he saw snow. Where Jonathan had stood in the hallway for hours, not knowing whether to knock. Where Lily had drawn a door on the wall with crayon and said, "That's where the people live when they can't talk." The house knew them. And now, it was listening. The key turned like it never left. The door opened by itself. Inside, everything was exactly where they'd left it. But nothing was the same. The furniture sat too still. The air smelled like paper and dreams gone stale. And the walls, they were no longer just walls. They were portraits. Not painted, not drawn, impressed. With moments, you could see them if you looked long enough. There, by the kitchen table, a memory flickered like film. Lily at 6, trying to tie her shoes. Jonathan crouched beside her, laughing quietly. In the hallway, Mary pacing, phone to her ear, biting back tears. The light above her head trembling slightly with each sharp breath. The stairs, Nathan dragging a pillow up 3 steps, only to fall asleep halfway through. And in the living room, the door. Still there, still red, still untouched. Not the first house, not the others. This door had never needed to be opened, because it had never closed. Mary walked toward it, breath caught in her throat. She reached out. "Stop," Lily said. Mary turned. She's still inside. Mary frowned. "Who? The version of you that stayed. The one who never left. The one who let everything die inside her to keep the rest of us breathing." Mary's hand dropped, because she knew what Lily meant. There was a version of herself she had locked away in this house. Not behind the red door. Behind every smile. Every careful act of normalcy. She had created her own ghost. A woman who held the weight so the others didn't have to. "I don't want to see her," Mary whispered. "You have to." The door didn't open this time. It simply dissolved. And inside was a room that never existed. A room filled with photographs, not hanging, just suspended in the air, like thoughts. Each one captured a different her. Mary at 14, staring out the window the day after her mother's funeral. Mary at 27, holding a pregnancy test in a bathroom stall, tears on her cheeks. Mary at 39, signing divorce papers with a smile that cracked at the edges. Mary at 45, standing in this house, right after Jonathan left, gripping the wall because she didn't trust her knees. Each version turned to her and spoke in unison. "You survived, but you didn't live." Mary collapsed to her knees, because they were right. She had endured, she had gotten through, she had made it. But somewhere along the way, she stopped being a person and became a container, and now the container was leaking. Lily knelt beside her. "It's okay. It's not," Mary said. "I don't know who I am without all of this pain." "That's the point," Lily whispered. "We've been walking through other people's memories for so long. We forgot to open our own." Mary looked up, and the door behind them was no longer red. It was glass, a mirror, and in it she saw herself, not as she used to be, not as she pretended to be, just as she was. A woman who had carried too much for too long and finally realized she didn't have to anymore. The mirror cracked once, then healed, and the house exhaled. Every portrait on the wall faded gently, not erased, just put to rest. The air grew lighter, the silence a warmer. Mary stood, and for the first time in decades, her shoulders didn't ache. She turned to Lily. "Let's go home." Lily smiled. "We are home." They stepped outside into the light. Not dawn. Not dusk. Just the kind of day that doesn't carry anything but now. And Harrow stood across the street, watching. For the first time, she didn't hold a folder. She didn't need to. Because Mary and Lily weren't just closing doors anymore. They were learning how to open new ones. And behind them, the house, the true house, the one that lived inside them, closed its eyes and slept. The road that took them away from the house didn't look different at first. Same cracked asphalt, same skeletal trees lining the edge of their vision like tired sentinels. But as Mary drove, something subtle shifted. The world around them grew clearer, not brighter, not cleaner, just more real. As if the fog that had coated their lives for so long had started to peel back, revealing a world that had always been waiting beneath it. They weren't being chased anymore. And for the first time, the silence inside the car wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Or at least it was, until they saw the sign, "Welcome to Hallow Creek where yesterday lives." Lily leaned forward in her seat, brow furrowing. That wasn't on the map. Mary slowed the car to a stop. The sign stood crooked at the edge of an overgrown highway exit, rust curling the corners like a smile too wide. The town's name stirred something in her stomach. Not recognition, not memory, but instinct, something primal, a pull from beneath the ribs. "You feel it too?" she asked. Lily nodded. "It's calling." Mary looked down the road. There was no turning back now. The moment they passed under the sign, the temperature dipped. Not cold, just off. The air felt dense. Not thick with moisture, but with intention. Like someone had built the town out of feelings instead of brick. The buildings were intact but far too quiet. Shops stood fully stocked behind dusty windows. A school bell echoed in the distance, but no children ever emerged. There were bikes on sidewalks. Lamps lit. Music played faintly from a record store. But not a single living soul walked the streets. "They built this," Mary murmured. Whatever created the first house." Lily glanced around. No. This place came before the first house. And as they drove deeper into town, that realization pressed harder into their skin. The layout was too perfect. Every house looked like a memory someone was trying to preserve. Every street turned at the exact moment you thought you were lost. This wasn't a town. It was a trap. They parked near a diner. Its sign buzzed, flickering between open and forever. Inside, a single booth light was on. Coffee steamed from 2 cups that hadn't been touched. Lily moved first, pushed the door open. The bell above didn't chime. It groaned, like a throat trying to scream through dust. They stepped inside, and the world repeated. One blink, and they were outside again. Same parking lot. Same diner, same buzzing sign. Mary looked at Lily. "Did we? We didn't leave," Lily said, staring at the building. They tried again. Opened the door, stepped in. Same booth, same coffee, same blink. Same reset. Mary clenched her fists. "We're not in a town. We're in a memory loop." And that's when the figures appeared. Not people. Not ghosts. Just imprints. Shapes that flickered between visibility and absence. A woman pushing a stroller. A boy riding a bike. A man with a briefcase. All silent. All smiling too wide. They walked the streets, past the car. Went into shops and vanished. Then appeared again 5 minutes later. Always in the same spots. Always doing the same thing. "This town's feeding off old lives," Lily said. "It's pretending it's alive." And as if the thought summoned her, Harrow appeared at the end of the street. But she wasn't walking. She was gliding. Lily's heart pounded. That's not her. Mary stood in front of her daughter, instincts sharp. Then what is it? The figure that looked like Harrow smiled, but her mouth didn't move. The expression stretched, bone cracking beneath skin that didn't quite fit. And then she spoke, not with lips, but with the town itself. The trees shivered. The air hummed. "You brought yourselves here," it said. Because you need to understand what came before. You've walked through houses built on grief, on guilt, on shame. But here, this place was made from denial so strong it built a civilization. Mary stepped forward. This place is a warning. No, the not Harrow whispered. It's a mirror. And suddenly, every window in the town lit up. Inside each one, Mary and Lily saw themselves. Not as they were, but as they could have been. In one house, Mary was laughing with Jonathan at the dinner table. Nathan alive and whole, his face full of joy. In another, Lily was a child on the swing outside, no scars behind her eyes, no heavy silence in her shoulders. Each window a version of life they'd wished for. 1,000 yesterdays, 1,000 lies. Mary shut her eyes. None of it's real. But you want it, the town said. Lily stepped beside her mother. We wanted to fix what happened, but not like this, not by pretending. The town began to shake, not from anger, from collapse. Because truth, when spoken loud enough, breaks even the most beautiful illusions. The street cracked. The figures paused mid-motion, their faces melting into static. The sky darkened. And Mary screamed, "You're not real?" The world shattered. Glass, sound, time, everything broke. And then silence, true silence, no looping, no lights, no figures. Just Mary, Lily, and the sound of now. They stood in the center of where the town used to be. Just cracked foundations and wind. Lily turned to Mary. We didn't need to see what could have been. Mary nodded. We just had to accept what was. And in the center of the rubble, a door stood. Wooden, normal, with no house behind it. Just a door. Lily reached for the knob. Mary grabbed her wrist. Wait. Because this wasn't like the others. There was no memory on the other side. No ghost. No trap. This door didn't go back. It only went forward. The final passage. Mary looked at Lily. Are you ready? Lily squeezed her mother's hand. I've never been more ready. Together, they opened it. And stepped into whatever came next. They stepped through expecting anything but what they got. No swirling light. No collapsing memories. No weightless drift between moments. Just nothing. A pure, endless blank. Not white, not black. Simply absence. Like they hadn't walked into a room, but out of existence. The moment their feet crossed the threshold, the world fell away, and in its place came a stillness so complete it roared in their ears. Mary reached for Lily's hand. But Lily wasn't there. She turned. No one. Only the door behind her, closed now, vanished a second later like it had never existed. Panic surged, then flattened. Even fear couldn't get traction here. This place didn't allow emotion. It was memoryless, timeless, formless. A place without edges. Her breath didn't echo. Her heartbeat made no sound. Mary opened her mouth to scream and felt the vibration in her chest, but not a single decibel reached her ears. She was alone. But not entirely. A figure materialized before her, not walking, not forming, just being. 1 second nothing. The next, a person. Her height, her shape, same eyes, same mouth, same every detail, the mirror version of herself. But where Mary trembled, this version stood still. Where Mary blinked in disbelief, the reflection stared with a terrifying calm. Who are you? Mary mouthed, though no sound came. The version smiled, and then Mary heard her voice. But not with ears. Inside her mind, a whisper that felt like truth. I'm who you would have become if none of this had happened. Mary staggered back. That's not possible. It is here. And then the world began to shift, not suddenly. Like memory, like regret, it bled into shape. Suddenly, Mary stood in a living room, familiar, hers, but different. Nathan was alive, laughing in the other room. Jonathan stood at the window, arms crossed, smiling at her like they hadn't aged a day. Lily ran down the stairs, young and bright, holding up a drawing of a red house. No shadows, no silence, no lost. Is this what you want? Her twin asked, stepping beside her. Mary stared at them, her family, whole, happy, unbroken. Her knees weakened. She nearly said yes. But then she noticed something. In every photo on the wall, she wasn't there. She turned to her mirror self. Where am I? You're here, the twin replied. Watching, choosing, always watching but never part of it. And then it hit her. This wasn't heaven, it was temptation. A prison made from want. This was the place people stayed when they couldn't move forward. Not a punishment, a choice. A beautiful lie sealed with longing. She shook her head. This isn't real. It could be, but it isn't. Her voice cracked now, actual sound returning. The twin smiled, almost sadly. Then why are you still here? Mary turned again. The family scene was frozen now. Lily mid-laugh. Nathan paused mid-jump. Jonathan's smile trapped in time. And in the window behind them, the reflection showed not Mary, but her grief. All of it. A swirling black shape, curled in the corner, mouth open in a scream that had no voice. The mirror, twin looked away. If you leave this place, you lose it forever. No more echoes, no more doorways, no more chances to remember them with this much life. Mary stepped forward, heartbreaking in a way she didn't think was still possible. She wanted to run to them, touch their faces, say goodbye. But that wasn't how this worked. She had to walk away. Fully. Finally. Goodbye, she whispered, voice raw. The moment she turned her back, the room cracked. Light spilled in. The illusion peeled, and the world beneath her returned. Only now, it was Lily's world. The void became color. The stillness became now. Mary blinked, gasped, fell forward, and landed in grass. Sunlight burned her eyes. Real sunlight. The kind that hums with bees and carries the warmth of today. She looked up. Lily was there, older, wiser, waiting. How long was I gone? Lily helped her up. You were never really gone. Just trapped. Mary clutched her chest. It showed me everything. It offered it all back. I know, Lily whispered. It did the same to me. Mary looked around. They were in a field. Wildflowers brushed their legs. The house was gone. Not destroyed. Not burned. Gone. The way a nightmare disappears when you open your eyes and truly wake up. Mary turned slowly full circle. No door. No harrow. No folder. No next location. Is it over? She asked. Lily didn't answer right away. She just walked to the center of the field and sat. I don't think it's about over. I think it's about choice. Mary sat beside her. The wind passed gently through the tall grass, warm and kind. What do we choose now? Mary asked. Lily smiled faintly. We choose forward. And in that moment, Mary understood. They hadn't beaten the house. They hadn't escaped it. They had accepted it. They had walked through it. And that was what no one else had done. Not the lighthouse keeper. Not the patients. Not the dreamers in the desert. Only them. Because they faced every memory without begging it to be different. And now, they were free. Truly free, not from pain, not from grief, but from the weight of trying to undo it. They lay back in the grass. No doors left to close, only open sky above them, and beneath it life. Real, messy, beautiful life. To be continued. The field was still. The sky overhead hummed a deep, steady blue. Not perfect, not painted. Real? The kind of sky you forget to appreciate until you've lived too long under shadows. Mary lay there longer than she realized, the weight of the past loosening its grip one heartbeat at a time. She didn't dream, not in the field. There were no doors left to walk through, no hallways collapsing behind her, but something still pulsed beneath the earth, a rhythm not tied to memory, but to movement. Life. It began when Lily pulled something from the grass beside her. Not a flower, not a root, a piece of paper. Stained, torn at the edges, but blank, until she touched it. The moment her fingertips grazed the corner, the paper shifted. Ink blotted from the center outward like veins reawakening. A map, impossibly detailed, drew itself in silence, roads and ridges, rivers and trails. And in the very center, a dot, not labeled, just pulsing. Lily turned to Mary, her voice cautious. It's not done. Mary sat up. It's still drawing. No, it's waiting. The map felt alive. Not like the haunted artifacts they'd encountered before, but like a compass made from their choices. A reflection, not of where they'd been, but where they still needed to go. And the strange part, the part that made Mary's stomach curl, was that she recognized parts of it. Places she'd never been, names she'd never spoken. But they rang through her bones like déjà vu etched into her blood. She touched the pulsing dot in the center, and the ground beneath her responded. A tremble, not dangerous, just permission. As if the field had been holding its breath this entire time and finally exhaled. The map shimmered, and the pulse spread. Like a beacon lighting up a trail, it's guiding us somewhere, Mary whispered. Lily nodded. Or it's reminding us of where we promised to go. They followed it, on foot. The car was gone. No sign of roads or tracks. The field melted into woodland, thick with pine and silence. Birds began to return. The air held warmth, no longer chilled by ghosts, and as they walked, the map changed. With every step, new ink bloomed. The path never curved until they decided it should. The trees never grew dense unless they hesitated. The map didn't lead, it reflected. This place, Mary said after miles of quiet, isn't about closing anything anymore. Lily looked at her. Then what is it? Mary ran her hand across the bark of a crooked tree. It's about building. They came upon a cabin, half-formed, its walls not yet finished, roof open to the sky, but it had a door, just one, no color, no glow, just there. Lily stepped to it and paused. Feels different. Mary joined her. It's not asking us to open it. Lily looked confused. Then what's it for? They stepped inside together and understood. The inside wasn't a room. It was a story, their story. Every door they'd walked through, every house, every echo, a trail laid out in space and light. Floating moments they could walk between, like constellations of pain and survival. The first house, the asylum, the white hospital, the house in the desert, even the memory, Loop Town. All suspended in this place, no longer threatening, no longer consuming. Just pieces, fragments that had formed them. And in the center of it all stood a pedestal. On it, a single object, a key. Not gold, not rusted, just solid. Mary reached out, but Lily stopped her. Not yet. She turned, and saw what she hadn't noticed before. A second version of the map, on the far wall, drawn in white lines, glowing faintly. But this one had something more. It wasn't about past doors. It was a blueprint of a new house, not haunted, not cursed, just unfinished. Mary stepped closer and realized it was their house, not rebuilt, not restored, reimagined. No trauma sealed in the walls, no echoes in the floorboards, just potential, possibility, peace. She looked to Lily. It's not asking us to revisit anymore. Lily smiled. It's asking us to create. Mary took the key, and the cabin around them began to respond. The floor beneath their feet grew warmer. Beams extended. Nails twisted themselves into wood. Glass set itself into window frames that hadn't existed seconds earlier. It wasn't magic. It wasn't fantasy. It was choice. Every truth they had faced, every pain they had carried, it was fuel now. And the structure took shape not from blueprints, but from healing. This wasn't just a cabin. It was the house they would build with eyes open, without denial, without fear. One that wouldn't trap memories, but hold them gently. Lily walked to the doorway, watching as the final wall settled into place. We were never supposed to run forever. Mary joined her. No, we were supposed to stop and decide what came next. Behind them, the room glowed. No more ghosts, no more mirrors, just the soft hum of a place that accepted them, not as broken people, but as whole ones who had survived. Together, they stepped outside, and the path behind them, every step they'd ever taken, was gone. Not erased, just complete. The field had returned. But now, in the distance, other structures stood. New doors, new beginnings. Not waiting for them to suffer, but welcoming them to live. Mary held the key in her palm, fingers closing around it. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to hold on. She was ready to use it. To open a door that didn't hold ghosts, just sunlight. The house had no name, but Mary and Lily called it the End House. Not because it was the final stop on their long, broken journey through grief and memory, but because it was the first place where nothing followed them in. No shadows stretched across the walls. No whispers from rooms that should have been empty. No forgotten doors sealed shut with secrets. Just air, fresh and unburdened. And wood that didn't groan like it remembered things. At first, they didn't speak much. The silence wasn't awkward. It was sacred. After what they had seen, silence had become its own kind of language. One built on survival, one spoken best with steady hands and careful presence. Mary would sit in the unfinished living room and run her fingers along the window frames, watching the wind press into the glass and leave, as if even the outside world now respected their peace. Lily painted walls in soft earth tones. She didn't ask permission. She didn't need to. This house wasn't about rules. It was about choices, but something quiet, subtle, began to stir. It started with the floors. The boards, newly placed, freshly stained, would shift when no one walked on them. Not loud, just a whisper of movement. A suggestion. Mary noticed it first. At night, when the wind died and the crickets slept, she would hear the smallest creak. A breath, almost. She chalked it up to the house settling. All homes breathe when they're new. But then, one morning, Lily found a crack along the baseboard in her room. A hairline fracture, running from the corner of the wall to the edge of the bed. Thin, straight. Like something beneath the floor had reached upward. She didn't mention it to Mary. Just covered it with a rug. The next day, Mary found an old photograph tucked under a floorboard in the kitchen. She hadn't put it there. It showed her as a girl, 9, maybe 10, standing in a house that no longer existed. The photo was real. The edges were curled, the ink faded. But she had never seen it before. And worse, she had never worn the dress in the photo. She held it for hours, turning it over and over, waiting for her mind to explain it away. Nothing did. That night, she dreamed of footsteps. Not her own. Not Lily's. Just a slow, rhythmic tread beneath the floorboards. One step, then two, then a pause, like someone waiting to be noticed. She woke up soaked in sweat, and the moment her eyes opened, the bedroom window was covered in handprints. Not pressed from inside, from outside. She didn't scream. Screaming was something you did when you thought help might still arrive. Mary rose from bed and touched the glass. The prints were already fading. Not smudged, just vanishing. Like they had never wanted to be remembered long. Lily met her in the hallway, already awake. "Something's here," she said. Mary didn't deny it. "How long have you felt it?" "Since we turned the key." They went back to the main room, sat on the bare floor, and stared at the fireless hearth. "This place isn't haunted," Lily said after a while. "It's listening." Mary frowned. "To what?" "To us. To what we haven't said yet." The wind outside stilled. Mary breathed deep. "I thought we were done." "We thought the door was the end," Lily whispered. "But it was just a pause. A place to choose what comes next." Mary leaned forward. "And we didn't choose to forget." Lily shook her head. "We chose to remember. And remembering always brings echoes." That night, they pried up the floorboards. Not the whole house. Just one section. Where the creaks had come, they expected nothing. But beneath the wood, they found dirt. Fresh. Undisturbed. Except for one thing. A child's shoe. Not old. Not dusty. Clean. Like it had just been placed there. Mary knelt. Her hands trembled. She didn't need to lift it. She knew it. It was Nathan's. Not a symbolic memory. The real thing. Same scuffed toe. Same tiny stitch on the side where she'd sewn it up after he'd tripped on the porch step. "How is this here?" she whispered. Lily didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because suddenly, it made sense. The door hadn't taken them to peace. It had taken them back. Not to the world they left, but to a place built from them. Their grief, their guilt, their longing. This house wasn't a fresh start. It was a reconstruction. A house made from memory, stuff, shaped by their will, yes, but also stitched together by everything they'd left behind. They hadn't escaped the maze. They had recreated it. But this time they were the architects. The question was no longer what haunts us. It was what do we carry forward? Mary held the shoe to her chest. She didn't cry. She let it stay heavy. Real. She laid it gently back into the dirt. Covered it, replaced the board. Not because she wanted to bury it again, but because this time it wasn't being hidden. It was being honored. That night, the house didn't creak. It didn't shift. It rested. As if, for once, it didn't need to speak louder than them. Mary lay in bed beside the window and listened. To Lily's steady breathing down the hall. To the wind returning gently to the trees. To the soft settling of a house not haunted, but healing. It wasn't finished. It would never be. Because peace wasn't a place you reached. It was something you chose again and again, even when the floor creaks and the past knocks softly at the walls. Especially then, the days that followed blurred into one another like brushstrokes on a canvas neither Mary nor Lily had ever meant to paint. They found themselves falling into a rhythm, not of normal life, but something slower, more deliberate. They mended what they could, built shelves they might never fill, cooked meals too quiet for conversation. The house never shifted again, not loudly. But underneath the calm, Mary felt something persistent. A vibration in the bones of the structure. A pulse so faint it could have been imagined. But she knew better. It was a heartbeat. Not hers, not Lily's, the house's, and whatever it was made of. Wood memory, ash hope, it had come alive. It wasn't aggressive. Not like the first house, or the looped town, or the bleached hospital. This place didn't want to trap them. But it did want something, and Mary, after a lifetime of being chased by doors she never wanted to open, had finally come to understand how to listen. So when she awoke one night to the sound of humming, not from the walls, but beneath the floor, she didn't panic. She followed it. The song wasn't a melody. It wasn't anything human, just a rising and falling tone, the kind you might feel more than hear. The kind you might remember from the womb. She padded barefoot down the hallway, past Lily's closed door, into the kitchen. And there, at the very center of the room, a circle of floorboards pulsed with warmth. She knelt. The wood felt like skin, alive but not human, humming but not mechanical. She pressed her ear to it, and the sound wrapped around her mind like a blanket of vibration. She didn't hear words, but she felt meaning. Beneath is not below. Beneath is within. She pulled back, took a deep breath, and knocked. 3 times, not out of ceremony, out of instinct. The boards sighed, then lifted, not cracked, not splintered. They simply folded backward like pages in a book, revealing a stairwell that hadn't been there before. No dust, no mold, just stone steps disappearing into a soft, red glow. Mary didn't hesitate. She grabbed a lantern and descended. With every step, the air grew warmer, thicker, not with rot, but with memory. The kind of weight that fills a room when you walk into a childhood home long after everyone's gone. The light wasn't fire. It was coming from the walls themselves, pulsing like breath. And then she saw it. A room, circular. Stone, like the inside of a well. But in the center, resting on an altar of smooth, pale wood, was a heart. Not a metaphor, not a carving, a heart. Suspended in the air, beating slowly. It didn't bleed. It didn't pulse with violence. It simply existed. And as Mary stepped closer, she felt it sink with her own. But dumb. Her chest mirrored its rhythm until the two were indistinguishable. She didn't speak. She didn't dare. But her mind asked the question anyway. What are you? And in the back of her skull, the house answered. Not in words, but in sensation. I am what you gave me. And then she understood. When she and Lily had passed through the final door, they hadn't escaped. They hadn't arrived. They had given birth to a place, a living space, formed from every choice, every scream, every silence. From the nights Mary clutched a knife in the dark without reason. From the dreams Lily stopped herself from dreaming. From Jonathan's departure, from Nathan's last breath. from every door that had ever stood between love and despair. They hadn't built a house, they'd grown one. The heart hovered, waiting, and Mary, tired, shaking, terrified, stepped forward. She reached out and placed her hand on it, and in that instant, the house gave her everything. Not a vision, not a dream, just truth. Every version of herself that had cried in silence. Every one that had lied to protect others. The Mary who had danced with Nathan in the rain. The Mary who had buried him. The Mary who had opened every door. And the Mary who had wanted to shut them all forever. They all came rushing in, not to overwhelm, but to return. Because to live meant to remember, and to remember meant to feel, and to feel was to continue. When Mary opened her eyes again, the heart was gone. The room was just stone. The altar, empty. But her chest ached, with fullness, with understanding. She climbed back to the surface and found Lily waiting at the top step. "You went without me," Lily said. Mary smiled, tears in her eyes. "You were already there?" And Lily nodded, because she understood, because she'd heard the heartbeat too. The house didn't whisper anymore. It breathed. Not haunted, not cursed, living. Mary reached out, wrapped Lily in her arms. For the first time, their embrace wasn't for protection. It was for celebration. They were no longer visitors in their own lives. They were residents now. And the house, their house, would never again hold secrets too loud to speak or too dangerous to remember. Because it had a heart now, and it beat in rhythm with theirs. For a while, it felt like peace. The kind that doesn't scream its presence, but seeps into your skin like the smell of warm bread or the hush after a storm. The house with its heart, its soft breathing between the boards, held no more surprises. Mary would wake to birdsong, and Lily would hum in the mornings as she painted, mixing water with color until the walls glowed. They didn't speak of the heart below the kitchen floor, not out of fear, but reverence. It was part of them now, like marrow, like a shared scar that had learned not to ache. But peace, Mary knew, wasn't a final state. It was a rhythm, and rhythms break. It began again with a shadow, not under the bed, not in the corners, but in Lily's eyes. One morning, Mary looked up from her tea to find her daughter staring out the window, unmoving. Not the stillness of rest, the stillness of return, like her body had paused and her mind had slipped sideways into a memory too old for the present. Mary spoke her name once, then twice. Lily didn't blink, and then, quietly, eerily, she laughed, a short, sharp thing that didn't belong in the room. Mary stood, alarm racing beneath her ribs. "Lily?" Lily turned slowly, her pupils enormous. Her smile was wrong, too wide, too tired, like it belonged to someone wearing her daughter's skin. And then she said, "It found us." Mary's breath caught. "What?" Lily blinked, and the smile vanished. Just like that. She frowned, disoriented. "What?" "You said." "I didn't say anything," Lily whispered, visibly shaken. "What's going on?" Mary didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the window Lily had been staring through. There was nothing there, no figures, no shadows, just the field, the forest beyond it, and the absence of something that should have been. Birdsong. Gone, completely. Like someone had cut the sound from the world. She opened the front door. Still no wind. Still no chirps. Just quiet, so dense it felt wet. She stepped outside, her boots pressing into grass that suddenly felt wrong. Too soft. Too deep. She took 2 steps and stopped. There were footprints. Small, bare. Not hers. Not Lily's, leading from the edge of the field to the base of the house. Not toward the door, but toward the foundation. As if someone had walked underneath. She followed them. Around the side, where the ivy hadn't yet grown. To a spot beneath the kitchen window. There, pressed into the earth, was a single word open. Mary backed away slowly. But not from fear. From memory. Because she'd seen that word before. Not written. Spoken. By a boy with no face in the house made of breathing wood. By the nurse who stared too long at the mirror. By the versions of herself that had begged her to look deeper. Open, they had all said. But this wasn't the same. This wasn't an invitation. It was a command. She ran inside, heart hammering, and found Lily curled on the couch, whispering to herself, over and over, "He's not real. He's not real. He's not real." Mary grabbed her shoulders. "Lily, who? Who isn't real?" Lily looked up, and her face wasn't hers. Not entirely. For a blink, just a flicker. Her features shifted, like a mask pulled too tight, and behind her eyes, something else looked back. Mary gasped and stumbled away, knocking over a lamp. The crash broke whatever held Lily. She blinked, gasped, covered her mouth. "Mama," she whispered. "He's here." "Who is?" "I don't know. But he knows me, and he wants to be remembered." Mary stepped back, the wall cold against her spine. "What did you see?" Lily's voice shook. "A boy, standing at the edge of the field, no mouth, no eyes, just presence. I didn't dream it. I didn't imagine it. He stood there and I knew. He wasn't watching the house." She looked up, tears streaking her face. "He was watching me." They didn't sleep that night. They sat on the living room floor, candles lit in every corner, listening to the house's heartbeat. But it was slower now, weaker, like something beneath the house was drawing it away. The peace they'd grown, earned, even, wasn't enough to stop what had always lingered at the edge of their story. The shadows that don't want to hurt you. They want to be known. And this one, whatever it was, had waited too long. Now it was tired of waiting, and it had found its way in. Not through cracks, not through doors. Through Lily. Mary realized, with a twist of guilt so sharp it felt physical, that maybe the final door hadn't been a conclusion at all. It had been a birth canal, and something else had slipped through with them. Not darkness, something older, more patient, not hunting them, attached to them, because the deeper you look into the past, the more the past looks back. And now, it wasn't whispering anymore. It was remembering itself. The house, once a sanctuary, had turned quiet again, but not the kind of quiet Mary and Lily had learned to cherish. This new silence had a texture, heavy, pressing, as if sound itself were afraid to breathe. The floorboards no longer creaked when they walked. The wind outside refused to rustle the trees. Even the house's heartbeat, once a comforting thrum beneath their feet, now stuttered, like it had begun to doubt its own right to exist. Mary tried to keep her hands busy. She swept, cooked, polished windows she hadn't touched in weeks. But all her movements felt forced, like acts in a performance no one believed in anymore. Lily, meanwhile, sat by the front window. Every day at the same time, staring toward the field, the spot where the footprints had stopped, where the word open had been etched into the dirt. She never said what she saw. Mary didn't ask. She knew the answer, he was still there. And still, they didn't speak his name. Not because they feared it, because he had none. A presence without a label, a weight without form. Mary had come to think of him as the echo between moments, a lingering hum that slipped in when your attention waned. He didn't knock, he didn't howl. He simply waited, so still and so patient that his very existence felt like the absence of presence. That night, it worsened. Mary woke to the sound of someone walking through the hallway, slow and deliberate. She sat up in bed, heart pounding. She waited to hear Lily's door open, but it didn't. The steps passed her door, then stopped. Right outside, she stood, pressed her ear to the wood. No sound. She opened the door. The hallway was empty, but not untouched. There were wet footprints leading away, bare, small, childlike. She didn't follow them right away. She just stared at the floor, heart sinking. When she finally moved, she didn't call for Lily. She knew her daughter would already be standing there, and she was. At the end of the hallway, just before the kitchen, Lily stood barefoot, her arms at her sides, head tilted toward the basement door. "He went below," she whispered. Mary's voice cracked. "Why now?" Lily didn't blink. "Because we saw the heart, and now he wants his." The basement door creaked open on its own. They both flinched. A whisper slipped from the dark stairwell. Not a word, just a sound, like air being pulled backward through a throat that hadn't spoken in centuries. Mary gripped Lily's hand. "We don't go down," she said. "Not tonight." But Lily's voice was far away. "If we don't, he'll come up." Mary swallowed hard. They sealed the door, nailed it shut, moved a shelf in front of it. But sleep didn't return. Not that night, not the next. The days stretched thin. Reality itself began to waver. Shadows lingered too long in corners. Objects moved when no one touched them. Once, Mary walked into the living room and found every photograph in the house placed in a perfect circle on the floor. Faces turned inward. All of them were missing their eyes. Still, Mary refused to let fear crack her resolve. She read aloud from books. She sang softly in the evenings. She reminded the house that it had been built from truth, not from ghosts. But every word felt swallowed by something listening too closely. Lily grew quieter. She stopped painting. She stopped eating. Sometimes Mary would find her standing perfectly still in random places. Bathroom, kitchen, closet, eyes glazed, whispering words that didn't belong in her mouth. Words that sounded ancient. And then, one morning, Mary found the door wide open. Not the front door, the basement door. No nails, no shelf, just ajar, breathing a stale wind that didn't belong to the earth. And on the top step sat a drawing. One of Lily's, crude. Charcoal smeared, lines frantic. A figure, 10. Limbs too long, no face. Standing in a house, no, under it. Its hands pressed to the ceiling, reaching up, as if begging to be pulled into the living world. Mary picked it up, fingers trembling. She turned it over. One word written on the back let. She dropped it, called for Lily. Silence. The kind that hummed. She raced through the house. Not in the rooms, not outside, not in the attic. The only place left. Mary descended. Step by slow step. The basement light flickered above her, then died. She lit a candle. And the moment the flame steadied, she saw her. Lily, standing at the edge of the heart altar, back turned. Still, Lily, Mary whispered. "What are you doing?" Her daughter didn't answer. Mary stepped forward, and then she saw them. Hands. Pale, thin, boneless hands, reaching out from the stone walls, brushing Lily's arms, her hair, her spine. They didn't grab, they caressed, as if touching something precious. And then Lily spoke, but not in her voice. He waited before the first door. He waited behind every one. He is not rage. He is not hunger. He is what remains when nothing else is allowed to remain. Mary screamed and lunged forward, grabbing Lily's arm and yanking her back. The hands recoiled with a hiss that was not sound, but pressure. The walls groaned. The altar cracked. The heart shuddered. Mary dragged her daughter up the stairs, stumbling, sobbing. Behind them, the basement door slammed shut. This time, not by their hand. And Mary knew something in her marrow then. The house hadn't just birthed safety. It had birthed a choice. Light and shadow had both come through that final door, and now the house had two hearts. One above, and one far, far below, and only one could keep beating. The next morning brought no sun. The sky hung low and dull, as if the clouds themselves were bracing for what was now unfolding beneath them. Mary stood in the kitchen with her hands wrapped tight around a steaming mug she hadn't sipped from. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, on the very spot beneath which the house's first heart pulsed, or rather had pulsed, because now it was uneven, like a drum that had forgotten its rhythm. Something had shifted. Something was fighting back. Lily hadn't spoken since Mary pulled her from the basement. She moved through the house like a ghost too afraid to haunt. Her eyes were her own again, but her gaze never held. She couldn't sit still, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and every time Mary got close enough, she felt a chill radiating from her skin. Not physical, spiritual, as if something inside her had touched frost and never quite thawed. The drawing she'd left on the top step still sat on the kitchen table. Mary had tried to throw it into the fire, but the flames refused to take it. The paper curled, darkened, but never burned. It always ended up back where it started, face down, with that single word written in a child's careful hand, let. Mary knew now the house was not divided by rooms or staircases. It was divided by loyalty. The heart above, born from healing, built from memory and love, was fading. And the other one, the second heart, deeper, darker, was gaining strength. It fed on something Mary had only just begun to understand: resonance. The way pain echoes when it's unspoken. The way fear lingers longer than joy. Every silence they'd offered, every memory they'd refused to revisit, it had grown him. The house had grown two hearts, and only one could survive. Mary knew what had to be done, but she also knew what it would cost. Because the second heart wasn't just lurking in the basement. It was inside Lily now, woven through her, like mold between the pages of a book. You couldn't tear it out without tearing everything. So instead of confronting it, she did something harder. She sat Lily down at the table. She didn't ask questions. She just spoke. "I remember the first day I brought you home," Mary said softly, staring into the untouched tea between them. "You were quiet, alert. You looked at every corner of the room like you were waiting for it to reveal something. You were never afraid of shadows, but you always watched them." Lily didn't move. "I used to think I had to keep them away from you," Mary continued. "I thought if I made enough light, you'd never have to see the dark. But I was wrong. I should have shown you how to walk through it." Lily's lip trembled. "You saw things I didn't protect you from. Doors I didn't even know existed. You carried pieces of me that I never meant to pass down. But Lily, you are not the house. You are not what waits in its walls. You are you." A single tear slid down Lily's cheek. Mary reached for her hand, and for the first time in days, Lily gripped it back. Hard. The air in the house changed. Walls creaked, not in fear, in warning, because something was listening, and it didn't want to be left behind. That night, Mary dreamed. She stood between the two hearts. One above, one below, both pulsing in opposite rhythms, trying to outpace each other. She heard them speaking, not in words but in longing. The first heart said, "Keep me and you stay whole." The second whispered, "Keep me and you stay safe." And then Mary realized the cruel trick. Both were wrong. Neither offered freedom. One was a shrine to pain, polished and dignified. The other was a pit, deep, bottomless, promising numbness in place of healing. And the real freedom was letting both go. When she woke, the decision was already made. She dressed quietly, gathered matches, rope, old journals she hadn't touched in years. She didn't tell Lily what she planned to do, but Lily followed anyway, because part of her already knew. They stood at the basement door one final time. Mary placed her hand against the wood. It was warm, the warmth of fever, not comfort. Lily's voice was barely a breath. "Are you sure?" "No," Mary said honestly. "But I'm ready." They opened the door, stepped into the dark, and this time they didn't bring light. They let the dark wrap around them, all the way down, until they reached the room. The altar, the second heart, it hung in the air, larger now, thudding like a war drum, and around it the walls moved, slowly, breathing, watching. He was there too. Not as a figure, not as a man, as a presence, coiled in the air between heartbeats, stretching into their skin, into their thoughts. He didn't scream, he simply waited. Mary knelt. She opened her bag. She placed every journal at the base of the altar, all her written memories, all her archived grief. Her hand shook as she lit the first match. The fire didn't roar, it sighed, and the second heart began to beat faster, like it knew. The flames grew, the journals crumpled. And then Mary took Lily's hand. "Now," she said. They reached out together, into the fire, into the heat, into the false promises of what they had carried for far too long, and touched the second heart, and it burned. Not them, itself, shrieking, collapsing, screaming inwards like a star dying. The room shuddered, the walls split, but Mary and Lily stood still, Because you don't flinch when you bury something that should have died long ago. And then, stillness. The second heart gone, the altar, ash, the presence silent. They climbed the stairs, back into a house that didn't breathe, because now, finally, it could rest. And as the sun rose for the first time in days, Lily looked to Mary and asked a question with a voice no longer borrowed. What happens now? Mary smiled. We build something that never needs two hearts again. For the first time in months, or maybe years, though time had long since bent and twisted in Mary's world, the house exhaled. Not with a groan, not with a warning, just a soft sigh, like the end of a long, held breath. The kind of release you don't notice until you realize how tense you've been. Mary and Lily stood together in the doorway of the now sealed basement. Dust settling in the beams of morning sunlight like snowflakes falling in reverse. There were no more pulses beneath the floor. No more breath behind the walls. The second heart, the false comfort born of fear and silence, was gone. And with its death came a strange stillness, one not born of dread, but of unfamiliar peace. But peace, as Mary had learned, was never a promise. It was a process, and that process had only just begun. The house, their house, looked different now. Not physically, but in feeling. Each wall no longer pressed in with memory. Each shadow no longer hinted at something watching. And yet, something remained. Not dark, not light, empty. Like a room waiting to be filled, not with noise, but with truth. Real, lived truth. The kind that doesn't demand to be carried. And the kind that waits to be shared. Mary sat at the kitchen table with Lily, the two of them wrapped in the quiet aftermath of something immense. Neither had spoken much since the fire in the basement. Words seemed too sharp, too clumsy for what had happened, but there was comfort in that silence now. The same way a bruise, once deeply painful, eventually fades to a dull ache. Present, yes, but healing. Then Lily broke the silence, not with a question, but a statement. He didn't come to haunt. Mary blinked, unsure at first who Lily meant. But then she remembered the drawings, the voice, the boy with no mouth and too much memory. The presence that had lingered like fog at their heels for too long. No, Mary agreed. He came to be remembered. And we gave him too much of the wrong kind. Lily looked at her, eyes clear. Do you think he was ever real? Mary paused. Considering that question the way one might consider a wound you're not sure ever healed properly. I think he was real to us. And that made him dangerous. There was no malice in her voice, only acceptance. He grew out of the things we refused to say, Lily added. And the things we held on to for too long, Mary replied. They sat there, side by side, as the morning sun crept across the table, inching toward the very spot where the word let had once sat carved into a slip of stubborn paper. Lily suddenly stood, walked to the wall, touched it. We need to let the house dream again. Mary looked up. What do you mean? Lily turned, her voice certain. We've been feeding it our past. Every board, every nail. We built it with grief, even the good parts of it. Nathan's memory, our love, our survival. It was all steeped in what we'd lost. But now the house is empty. Waiting. Mary rose slowly. Waiting for what? For new stories. Those words hung in the air like bells too soft to ring. And Mary knew she was right. They couldn't just live here anymore. Not if they wanted to be free. They had to fill the space they'd fought so hard to claim. So that night they began. Not with rituals or fires, but with living. They moved furniture they'd never dared touch. Opened closets they'd kept sealed. They filled the shelves with books they hadn't yet read. Painted rooms in colors chosen from joy, not nostalgia. Mary planted herbs in the kitchen window, basil, rosemary, thyme. And Lily picked up her brushes again. Not to paint memories, to paint possibilities. She started with the hallway, murals of vines and stars, of climbing ivy and open skies. Things not yet real but hoped for. They laughed, awkward at first, like people learning how to breathe without choking on the past. They cooked dinner and danced barefoot in the living room. They watched movies with the lights on. They let the windows stay open at night, unafraid of what might drift in. And the house responded. Subtly. At first. The warmth returned to the floorboards. Not like before, not the fevered hum of the second heart, but a gentle radiance, like the wood-remembered sunlight. The walls no longer shifted with secrets. They stood firm, silent, and safe. The house was no longer a reflection of what they feared. It was becoming a canvas for what they chose. But Mary knew something deeper had changed. One morning, she walked to the old basement door, not out of fear, but curiosity. It was still sealed. But there, pressed into the wood with something that looked like charcoal, was a drawing. Not of the faceless boy, not of a dark figure reaching from the walls, but of a heart, one, whole, and beside it 2 figures, one tall, one small, holding hands, standing in a field with a house behind them. No ghosts, no shadows, just presence. Mary didn't call Lily to see it. She didn't need to. She smiled, because she understood now. The house wasn't dreaming in the way they feared. It was dreaming them. And as long as they kept living forward, not just remembering back, the dream would continue, safe, full, and their own. Peace wasn't the absence of pain. It was the presence of choice. And they had chosen each other. The days that followed felt like spring blooming beneath winter's last breath. Something invisible had thawed in the walls, and the house began to feel lighter. Not lighter in weight, but in memory. It no longer carried their grief like a weight dragging at the floorboards. It held it now, gently, like a story already told, no longer needing to be relived. And though there were still quiet nights, they weren't haunted anymore. They were peaceful in a way Mary had forgotten existed, uneventful. Lily painted the last of her mural that week. A staircase that twisted into a sky of stars, each brushstroke deliberate, each color wild. Mary didn't ask what it meant. She didn't have to. It was forward-looking, daring to dream of a direction that had nothing to do with the places they had been. There was strength in that. Quiet, steady strength. But just as she let herself believe it might be over, that the strange journey through memory, doors, and darkness had ended, the knock came. Not a bang, not a slam, just a knock. Soft, polite, measured. 3 taps. Like someone testing a thought they hadn't dared to say aloud. It came from the front door, at a time when no one should have been awake. Just past 3 in the morning, when dreams still held tight and the world outside remained undone. Mary opened her eyes to it. The sound hadn't echoed through the house. It had whispered to her, straight into her consciousness. A knock not meant to be heard, but to be felt. She sat up. The knock came again. No footsteps followed it. No voice called from the porch. Only silence and the door waiting. She rose quietly, careful not to wake Lily, though something told her Lily was already awake. The hallway stretched long in the darkness, and the shadows didn't feel threatening. But they didn't feel empty either. There was a sense of attention in the air, like the house itself had paused to listen. Mary reached the door. Another knock. Not louder, just closer. It sounded almost inside now. Her fingers hovered over the handle. Then she paused and asked a question, one she hadn't dared in a long time. Who's there? No answer. Only stillness. Then, impossibly, from behind her, inside the house. A child's voice, clear as water, "Don't open it." Mary froze. Slowly, she turned around. No one stood there. No child. No echo. But on the ground behind her, near the base of the stairs, a trail of small, wet footprints gleamed in the moonlight. She didn't follow them. Not yet. Instead, she turned back to the door. No more knocks came. But something had changed. She felt it. This wasn't a threat. It wasn't a ghost. It was a return. Later that morning, over breakfast, Lily didn't need to ask what had happened. She looked at her mother's face and knew. "He's still here," Lily said. Mary didn't deny it. "He never left, but he's different now. Is he angry?" Mary shook her head. No, not angry, curious. They both fell silent again. Then Lily said something that chilled Mary, though she couldn't say why. He doesn't knock for us. He knocks to see if we're still listening. Mary understood. The heart they'd burned wasn't the end of the story. It was a transformation. You don't erase the past by setting it on fire. You invite it to evolve, and sometimes it comes back, not as danger, not as sorrow, but as reminder. Later that day, they followed the footprints. They led to the attic, a place they hadn't touched since moving in. The door creaked open under Mary's hand, and the scent of dust and dry wood filled her nose. Sunlight streamed in through the small circular window, and there, in the middle of the attic floor, sat a box, unmarked, old but not ancient. Mary opened it slowly. Inside were objects she couldn't remember packing. A baby blanket with Nathan's initials. A necklace Jonathan once gave her, and she thought she'd thrown away. A music box shaped like a bird's cage, one she'd seen in her mother's house when she was 5. Things lost. Things forgotten. Things kept. Mary didn't cry. Instead, she smiled, because this wasn't a trick, it was a gift. The house hadn't brought the past to hurt them. It had kept these pieces for when they were ready to face them with gentleness, not guilt. Mary took the music box and opened it. The melody was soft, sweet, off-key in places. It filled the attic, and Lily sat beside her without a word. Together, they listened, not to ghosts, not to grief, to memory. And when it ended, the house creaked, not with tension, but with ease, as if it were stretching after a long, peaceful sleep. They descended the attic stairs lighter than they had climbed them. That night, the knock didn't come. But Mary knew it would again someday, not as a warning, but as a conversation. The past was not gone. It was part of them. And now, finally, it was welcome. Morning came with a softness that didn't feel like forgetting but forgiveness. The sky was pale and gold, the kind of hue that made the window panes glow, as if the light itself had something to say. Mary stood by the kitchen window, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, though she'd long since stopped pretending it was just about the tea. The act had become something more, a rhythm, a reminder that peace could live in repetition. She could still feel the weight of the attic box in her arms from the day before, the way each object inside had been stitched to a version of herself she hadn't spoken to in years. The house had changed again, subtly but undeniably. Not like before when it bent and moaned, not like when it cried out or split open with rage. This change was inward. It had grown quietly thoughtful, like a person mid-sentence who suddenly paused, wondering if they'd ever really meant the words they were about to say. The house wasn't speaking anymore. It was listening and waiting. Mary felt it in her bones. The way even before a storm touches down, that something is moving through the earth beneath your feet. Not danger, not doom, but a final page turning. She didn't speak of it to Lily. She didn't need to, because Lily had begun to paint doors again, one on the wall beside her bed, tall, narrow, arched, its knob delicately gold. One beneath the window in the hallway, half shrouded in vines and stars, and one more on the ceiling above the kitchen table. A hatch that opened to sky instead of wood, each door different. Each one quietly pulsing with intent. Mary didn't ask her daughter what they meant, because she already knew. They were not portals. They were possibilities, and all of them led inward. It was 2 nights later when the door returned. Not the front door, not the basement. This one appeared in the hallway, where a blank patch of wallpaper had always existed. It came without sound, without shift. One moment, nothing. The next, a simple wooden door with no knob, no lock, and no sign that it had ever opened before. But it breathed, softly, gently, like the whisper of cloth against skin. Lily was the first to find it. Mary found her standing before it, barefoot, her hand just inches away. "He's not behind this one," Lily said quietly. Mary joined her. "Then who is?" Lily turned her eyes wide and tearful. Me. Mary felt her own breath catch. Because she understood. Every door they'd faced before had led them deeper into the past. Into memory, into pain. Into echoes of things that refused to be forgotten. But this door was different. It didn't want to take. It didn't want to warn. It simply wanted to be noticed. A part of Lily, unspoken. Unmet. "Do you want to open it?" Mary asked. Lily didn't answer. She pressed her palm against it, and the door disappeared. It didn't open. It dissolved. Vanished into the wall like mist against wind, and behind it, a mirror. But not one that reflected just the body. This mirror was deep, too deep. It shimmered with moments, flickers of time swimming just behind the glass. Versions of Lily, laughing, screaming, painting, silent. All of them real. All of them possible. Lily stepped forward and touched the glass. The mirror didn't crack, didn't resist. It simply welcomed her. Images spilled across its surface, memories that had never been shared aloud. The night Lily stood alone in the hospital when Mary had been unconscious. The silent hours she spent staring at her own hands, wondering if they still belonged to someone who deserved to be whole. The hope she'd clung to in secret, the drawings she never showed anyone, the words she never said because she feared they would disappear the moment they left her lips. It was all there, laid bare, and Mary stepped beside her, placed her hand on the mirror too, and to her surprise, she was there too. Not in the reflection, in Lily's memories. The moments Lily remembered, her mother holding her hand when no one else could. The warmth of Mary's voice when the world was unraveling. The strength Mary never knew she had shown, written in Lily's eyes like scripture. The mirror wasn't a door, it was a witness. And for once, it didn't ask them to open anything, it asked them to see. When they stepped back, the mirror faded, the hallway returned, no seams, no cracks. Just them, mother and daughter, carrying a weight that had finally turned light. They went to bed in silence, but it was the right kind of silence. And in her sleep, Mary dreamed not of doors, not of shadows, not of fire or hearts or boys who had no name. She dreamed of Lily, of laughter, of a field with no end. The next morning, Mary woke to the sound of paintbrushes again. Lily had begun a new mural, not a door, not a window, but a tree, tall, reaching, green, and beneath it, two shadows sat cross-legged, heads leaned against one another. And the title scrawled above in careful handwriting, "The Place We Grew From." Mary smiled. The house had stopped bleeding. The house had started dreaming. And now, finally, it was time to live. It didn't end with fire. It didn't end with screams or collapsing walls or the sky tearing itself open. No storm came. No shadows dragged themselves across the floor. Instead, it ended the way all real stories do, not with a bang, but with a moment so gentle it almost went unnoticed. A new morning, a steady breath, a girl humming while painting the last leaves on a tree that had once only existed in her dreams. Lily stood barefoot in the hallway, her fingers stained green and gold, the mural complete. Mary watched from the kitchen, her hands resting on a warm mug, the light pouring across her face like a promise finally kept. The house, too, had changed, not in shape or color or size, but in feel. It had stopped speaking in riddles, stopped moaning beneath the floorboards. It no longer breathed with the weight of buried grief. It had become quiet, not because it was hiding, but because it no longer needed to warn. It had done its part. It had carried their secrets, absorbed their sorrow, held their memories when they were too heavy to carry alone. And now, finally, it was letting go too. Mary walked the halls without flinching. The soft creak of the floor beneath her steps no longer sounded like a voice calling from some forgotten depth. It was just wood stretching under time. Familiar, real. She stopped at the door frame where Lily had painted the first mural. The one of the staircase reaching the stars. It shimmered faintly in the morning light, not magic, just reflection. But Mary smiled, remembering how it had once felt like a map leading out of darkness. She placed her hand on the wall, not expecting a pulse, not expecting anything but wood, and that's what she felt. Just wood, just a wall. At last, Lily had begun singing again, not just humming. Real singing, out loud without apology. Her voice wasn't perfect, but it was full. Mary would hear it drifting from the upstairs bathroom, from the garden out back, from the kitchen late at night, when Lily baked muffins just because she could. It was the sound of a girl who had crossed something terrifying and hadn't lost herself to the journey. It was the sound of someone who had decided to live. That afternoon, they sat together on the front porch. The grass in the field swayed without menace. Birds sang. A rabbit darted past the tall weeds like punctuation in the quiet. The wind was back, not cold, not sharp, just wind, real clean and present. Mary turned to her daughter. "Do you ever think about the doors?" Lily didn't hesitate. "I remember them, but I don't feel them anymore." "And the boy?" Lily was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "He's sleeping. Or maybe he found what he needed and doesn't need to knock anymore." Mary nodded, accepting that. Accepting everything. There would be no final confrontation, no epic unraveling, because that wasn't what they needed. They needed this, a home that didn't demand an explanation. A space where healing wasn't something mystical or distant. It was present in every shared glance, every meal cooked without fear, every night spent in silence that didn't echo with dread. She stood and stepped into the yard, her boots pressing into the damp earth. She didn't feel anything under her feet. No heartbeat, no whisper, no watching presence. Just dirt and roots and grass. And it felt good. Final. Not the kind of finality that ends things. The kind that begins them anew. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades Lily had yet to capture on any canvas, Mary returned to the attic. The box was still there, untouched since they'd last opened it. She lifted the lid, expecting nostalgia to flood her. But instead, she felt stillness, a calm acceptance. She sifted through the old photographs, the necklace, the music box. But this time, she added something. A photograph of her and Lily taken just 3 days before, sitting on the porch, the fields stretching behind them, laughter caught in the moment. She placed it gently on top of the rest, closed the lid, and whispered, "This, too, is memory." Downstairs, Lily was lighting candles, not to banish shadows, but because she liked the scent of lavender and honey. Mary joined her at the table, and together they prepared dinner. Chicken, rosemary, potatoes, roasted carrots from the garden. There was no urgency, no tension, no conversation about survival. Just two women who had finally stepped fully into their lives. That night, Mary stepped outside before bed, letting the cool air wrap around her. The stars above were endless. She looked up, and for a flicker of a second, she thought she saw it. The staircase Lily had painted, not on the wall, but etched into the constellations. And maybe she did. Because now, finally, she could see possibilities where once she'd only seen warnings. When she went to bed, she left the bedroom door open. No locks, no candles to ward off ghosts. Just a home filled with love lived in fully. And the house, it slept with them. Not watching, just resting. Because the story had never been about the house. It had always been about the people it held, and what they were willing to face inside themselves when the doors creaked open. And in the end, they didn't conquer the darkness. They simply chose not to carry it anymore. Not all ghosts howl. Some just want to be remembered, then gently let go. And Mary, with Lily beside her, finally did. The house would remember, but differently. Not as a place of hauntings, as a place of healing. As a place where a mother and daughter came back to life.